Yeah, I've been just picking up pieces of you. Think about how can I keep with you? I've been just picking up pieces of you. Think about how can I keep with you? 헤어지자고 아침부터 you've been going through my phone. 말해봐 내가 바보인 줄
Cedric Richmond, Senior Advisor to President Joe Biden, shares insights about the future social and economic transformation of America.
Judge Regina Chu literally shed tears as she ignored prosecutors' request for at least a 7-year sentence for former police officer Kim Potter, who was convicted of manslaughter after she shot and killed Daunte Wright, claiming that she thought she pulled her taser and not her gun. The string of threats was likely racially motivated. Nearly 20 HBCUs went into lockdown and had increased security presence after receiving bomb threats on Tuesday, the first day of Black History Month.
We had a United States Senator come right out and say that he thought the idea of selecting a black woman, that would be Ted Cruz, was offensive. The fact that he felt comfortable saying that in public, right in front of everybody's face, is a really, truly an amazing thing.
When black boys, for example, are in private or public schools, integrated schools, systems distrust and diminish, try to destroy their sense of well-being and try to create this conformity in a black boy that tells the black child where and what power is, and that is not within him or his family. So
Hi, I'm Karen Carter Richards, Chairman of the Board for the National Newspaper Publishers Association. On behalf of the NNPA, I welcome you to Black Press Week. Our theme for today's forum is saluting and celebrating the 195th anniversary of the Black Press of America. For the past 195 years, since the first publication of Freedom's Journal on March 16, 1867, in New York City by publishers John Brown Russwurm and Samuel Cornish, the Black Press of America has continued to be on the front line, reporting news and amplifying the voices of Black Americans as we struggle for justice and equality. Just as Russwurm and Cornish declared on the front page of Freedom's Journal, we continue to plead our own cause today. Today, we represent 230 African American owned newspaper and media companies throughout the United States. While many of our communities are emerging out of the devastating COVID-19 pandemic, our NNPA member publishers remain vigilant, outspoken, creative, productive, and strive to ensure sustainability in today's marketplace. We thank the NNPA Fund for recognizing and enshrining the legacy and memory of another one of our outstanding publishers who contributed greatly to the advancement of the Black press. William Bill Garth, Sr., was a dedicated, iconic publisher of the Chicago Citizen newspaper group for many years. May his memory be a blessing to all. Given all the issues that we are facing in America and in the world, the Black press is needed today more than ever before. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the NNPA, and for all of our member publishers, I state on the record that we are proud of the Black press, and we will keep pressing forward to advance the progress of the communities in which we serve every day. During this National Issues Forum, we will cover voting rights, healthcare, education, economic development, criminal justice reform, and many other issues that are important to the quality of life for our families and our communities. Lastly, thank you to all of our corporate partners and sponsors. Your continued support enables the NNPA to present this following forum.
What would you call a joy that knows no bounds? That is as solemn as it is sweet, with an outpouring of soul that connects us. Joy in resilience, joy in creativity, joy in happiness, joy in strength. What would you call a joy that knows no bounds? A joy supreme. AARP celebrates Black joy. Visit us at aarp.org/blackcommunity.
On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, I join the NNPA Chair, Karen Carter Richards, and the NNPA Chair of our National Planning and Events Committee, Terry Jones, to welcome all of you to our celebration of Black Press Week 2022. We have a National Issues Forum that we're going to be spending the next couple of hours going over all of the key issues that impact the quality of life of the communities in which we serve. We're so pleased to acknowledge and to celebrate that 195 years ago, on March 16, 1827, when Freedom's Journal was first published, we're still pleading our own cause. We're very proud of the Black press and thank all of you for joining us today as we celebrate this significant milestone of the Black press of America. Today's program is made possible with the generous support of our corporate partners and our sponsors. First, we thank our 4 corporate partners: General Motors, Pfizer, Reynolds, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We thank the following sponsors of today's program: Wells Fargo, AARP, Comcast, AmeriHealth Caritas, In Our Own Voice, the National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, the Facebook Journalism Project, Google. And we thank all of these sponsors. We thank all of our partners for their support of the National Newspaper Publishers Association and today's program.
How you guys doing? My name is Joseph Bramlett, and I'd like to congratulate the Black Press on making it 195 years. Continue the hard work.
Change. You can resist it, be left behind, or embrace it and move forward.
We're driving it
everywhere.
We emit optimism, not exhaust.
We plug in our vehicles as naturally as we charge our phones.
We don't judge cars by the rev of an engine,
but by the hum of progress. We
are Generation E.
United.
Not by age,
but by the desire
for smart, clean, and safe.
To also be fun, easy,
and powerful. And our power
comes from this.
Ultium. A battery that charges fast.
Runs long. It fits everyone.
Because when it comes to this all-electric future,
nobody
will be left out.
And that changes everything.
The electric future starts now.
I am Tarshina Armstrong, Director of Diversity Marketing and Development for General Motors. Congratulations on celebrating 195 years of the Black press. That is truly an outstanding accomplishment. The Black press is more relevant than ever. We know that no one can tell our stories like we tell our stories. The NNPA has consistently been a voice of the Black community and an incubator for news that continues to make history and impact society at large. You continue to help shape through leadership and driving change within our communities. We are incredibly grateful for the partnership we have with the NNPA and helping us tell our story. At General Motors, we have the aspiration to be the most inclusive company in the world. We are making intentional efforts to increase our diverse-owned media investment, and we are hiring more diverse talent than ever before through programs like the Chevrolet Discover the Unexpected program, headed into our 6th year thanks to your great organization. We couldn't do any of this without the support of the Black press. Thank you for being a part of our journey. I hope that you all have a successful press week. We look forward to being together in person soon. Thank you.
Next, we're going to show a tape of one of our special sessions on education. Thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we're focusing on how to improve the quality of education for African Americans and other communities of color as we come out of COVID-19 epidemic and the challenges that the public school system is facing.
Good morning on this Wednesday, January 12th, 2022, and welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Dozens of Black authors whose works are being pulled from school libraries under the pretext that they are teaching critical race theory, although most of the books that are targeted for bans don't teach critical race theory but are written by and about people of color. The American Library Association said its Office for Intellectual Freedom reported 273 books were affected by censorship attempts in 2020, many with content that highlighted race, gender, and sexuality. And since September alone, there have been at least 230 challenges, the organization says. We discussed that this morning with our special guest, author Celeste Headlee, also Oshia Boyd of the Indianapolis Recorder, and James Wright of the Washington Informer. In fact, let's bring on right now Oshia Boyd and James Wright as we go through the headlines for this morning. Good morning, Oshia and James.
Good morning.
Good to have you as always. But first, before we get to the news topics, we have some internal breaking news. There has been a change because of the Omicron variant that is spreading rapidly across the country and the travel involved. The National Newspaper Publishers Association has announced this morning that it is postponing its midwinter conference that was scheduled to begin January 19th, and it's simply for the safety of the publishers who are traveling from all over the country. And the virus has really taken on a new life now. So for the health and safety of all who were planning to travel, the NNPA will postpone it. We will announce soon a new date for that conference. So hold on, and we are asking our special guest, Stephanie Mills, to hold on. She's been a trooper. She's a big supporter of the Black press, so we expect her to join us when we do resume that conference. But right now, the news headlines this morning: famous author and noted civil rights leader Maya Angelou became the first African-American woman featured on the 25-cent coin. The U.S. Mint began shipping the quarters on January 10th. Reportedly, the Angelou coin is the first in a series designed to celebrate the accomplishment of American women. Each time we redesign our currency, we have the chance to say something about our country, what we value, and how we progressed as a society. Those were the words of Janet Yellen, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Treasury Secretary. She says, "I'm very proud that these coins celebrate the contributions of some of America's most remarkable women, including Maya Angelou." I think it's big news there, Oshia.
It's awesome news. That is amazing news. And what a great first person to tribute. So awesome. I didn't even know about this. I didn't even know. Somehow I missed it. Been focused on the $2.
This is what we're here for, Oshia. And we know Maya Angelou's works, James, include such classics as I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and Still I Rise and The Heart of a Woman. She died in 2014, but not before she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor from President Barack Obama. The new coin features Maya Angelou with her arms uplifted, a bird in flight, and a rising sun behind her. Maya Angelou, yeah, how about that? How about that?
Well, you know, I know Oprah is happy about it, so if Oprah's happy, I'm happy.
Really? I don't know about that, James. I don't know if my happiness relates in any way relates to Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey got enough money to buy happiness for the next 200 years. I ain't worried about Oprah's happiness.
Well, I'll just add this really quickly as we get into the next segment, but her book will be Target. So
there you go. There you go.
Her book will be targeted. So
there you go. And we're going to talk about that in a few moments with our special guest. But also in the news this morning, prayer breakfasts, marches, parades, and an uptick in volunteer efforts to support the annual day of service have remained staples of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But the late civil rights icon family has asked that observers strike a different tune in 2022. King's family has requested no celebration unless federal lawmakers pass voting rights legislation, a task that appears out of reach as President Joe Biden and several Democrats have faced stiff Republican opposition. Democrats have also, James, been hampered by members of their own party, notably West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, whose vote is crucial in an evenly split chamber. Are they going to get this done? Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said that they will have a vote by Martin Luther King Day, which is Monday, on the filibuster and voting rights. I just don't see it, James. Do you?
I don't see it either. What I do see is a whole lot of discussion around this voting rights and voter suppression. And, you know, the president has got to be the president. He has the power to put pressure on Joe Manchin in terms of being able to deliver resources and grants and things like that in order to get things done, as well as fundraising prowess. So we need the president to really step up for voting rights.
Well, in a statement, Martin Luther King III, the eldest son of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, says, "We will not accept empty promises in pursuit of my father's dream for a more equal and just America." They are demanding that this legislation get done. As in a conversation I had with the chair of the National Newspaper Publicists Association yesterday, Karen Carter Richards, she said, "Get it done." And so they need to get it done. And I'm sure, Oshia, you see it the same way.
Yeah, I like this flex from his family. I really do. I think they probably could have been flexing all along to actually put pressure on legislators to actually make things happen. We shouldn't even be here today. This should have happened a long time ago. So it's disappointing that we're still here arguing about the same thing, but I really like seeing his family come out and put their foot down.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that we've come to this moment, as you said, and I keep harking back to this, and it's something that we are writing about as well. But I keep harking back to this, that in the 1960s, what year, James, the historians, 1965, when President Johnson got the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act passed?
Yes, it was 1965, and it was based on the activities of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And that was just the event that the president and the civil rights community needed in order to get it past both the House and the Senate that year.
Well, and so you think about it under those circumstances, right? And I said it, and please understand the context. In 1965, there was still this idea that you can call a black man boy. There was still this idea that you can call black people niggers. There was still this idea that you can lynch black people. There was still so much going on. The struggle was far from over, the civil rights struggle, yet they got civil rights passed, right?
That's right.
And they got voting rights passed. Now today they're trying to get civil rights passed in the form of George Floyd Justice and Police Act, and they're trying to get voting rights passed in 2022. You would think, so James and Oshia, that it would be a little bit easier today. Why not?
Well, the problem with the Senate is that you have some moderate Republicans such as Susan Collins and Mitt Romney, Rob Portman, and even a persuadable, I would say, Tim Scott out of South Carolina, who know what is right, and they're Republicans, but they don't want to do the right thing because they don't want to offend Mitch McConnell. That would have been unthinkable maybe about 20 years ago when senators were independent and they thought about doing what was right and based on what their states want and not just what one man wants. But in terms of the Democrats, they're almost locked up except for Sinema of Arizona, and she's coming around, what I'm hearing, and Joe Manchin. But Joe Manchin wouldn't even be an issue on this because civil rights was just something that the Democratic Party, since Lyndon Johnson, has just supported.
Well, Oshia, I'm just going to ask this question, then we'll move on, and I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Is this president strong enough? I won't frame it the other way. The other way was to ask. I guess I will frame it. Is he just too weak?
I'm going to go with yes. I'm going to go with yes. I think they're all too weak, or we would have had this done a long time ago. It's about priorities. It's about priorities, and this is not a priority. I don't think. If it happens, I will be amazed. I will come back and I will eat my words and say he is not too weak. But I think it's about priorities, and this is not on the high list of priorities.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to take that back. I'm going to say this too, James, that I like what Oshia just said, priorities, right? And perhaps too, Biden has been in politics. President Biden has been in politics forever. Is it just his time has passed?
Well, here's what I believe is going on. Biden may have been in too long. It's interesting that you have had governors who have become president and they were able to move legislation because they're used to dealing with legislators. It's on the state level, but legislators. But Biden has been in the Senate and he's too wedded to the Senate and he's too wedded to its the way it operates. And sometimes you need an outsider in that presidential position in order to get things done. Lyndon Johnson as the exception. But my point is that I think that he's growing into the office, considering who he succeeded in that office. But he has got to get the Democratic Party behind his priorities, behind voting rights, behind him passing that George Floyd bill, or his administration will be a wash.
Well, we will see. Again, Senator Schumer said that a vote will take place by Monday on both the filibuster and voting rights in the Senate. So we will see. Celeste Hart writes in. She says about Maya Angelou and banned books. She says, I know why the Cage Bird Sing was banned in schools in North Carolina, her home state. Well, that's what we're discussing this morning. Black authors are being banned. Their work is being banned. They're calling it critical race theory. We now bring on Celeste Headley, who is the author of Speaking of Race. She's also the co-host of the weekly series Retro Report on PBS. Good morning, Celeste.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. First and foremost, congratulations on the new book. Before we get into this, let's tell us just a little bit about the book and what it took to put it together.
So this book is how to get through the conversation about race. It's meant to sort of diffuse some of the apprehension people feel, not only people of color, but white people as well about talking about this by just walking you through it. The best science we have, the best psychology that we have to get you through this conversation without getting into an argument and maybe make a tiny little bit of progress. So this isn't a book that's going to give you history. It's not going to tell you why you shouldn't touch my hair. It's going to tell you how to get through that conversation after that bad thing has happened, or after you just have you're curious about something connected to race. So it kind of fills that little gap that was missing.
Yeah, and so we're seeing, Celeste, that Black authors are being banned. Their work is being banned in schools and other institutions. Now, you had an experience too that you shared with us before we went on about your book. When it comes, speaking of race, is the name of the book. Share that with our audience as well.
Yeah, one of the publishers that we first offered it to before we went to HarperCollins said, "We have enough books on race. we don't need to add another book on race. This topic is covered for us," which was very surprising considering the fact that we were offering it in the summer of 2020. We all know what was happening back then. So yeah, and I also think it's interesting. You were talking about the Maya Angelou quarter, and your listeners, your watchers, absolutely right. Maya Angelou for quite some time was called the most banned author in America. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was banned a bunch of times, and we're talking about an author who won a National Book Awards and a Pulitzer Prize and an Emmy. And her book was banned again and again and again. In fact, in one particular case, they said that it caused bitterness and rage in young children, and that's why they didn't want kids reading it. So, I mean, what hope do the rest of us have if Maya Angelou, Pulitzer Prize winning Maya Angelou, is called bitter? Yeah. It caused bitterness and hatred against whites. That was at one point the justification for banning her. And so here we are again, right? And everything old is new again. This isn't like, oh, they're suddenly out of nowhere banning Black authors. This has happened again and again. You almost can't get through a decade in the United States history without seeing Black authors being banned.
Yeah, O'Shea and James, among the books recently banned from schools in Texas, in particular, was the book. It tells us Black boys who experience racism in schools, and they were banned from school libraries. I can't think of the author's name. I'm sorry, you guys. Got a brain cramp. But anyway. The author said he was shocked that his books were banned. He says, apparently I'm teaching critical race theory, and confused parents wrote about the ban. They cited the decades-old academic and legal framework that teaches about racism in America. Basically, what is critical race theory?
Pretty much anything has to do with Black people.
That's what it sounds like.
That's what it's come. Anytime you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and race, that is what critical race theory has now become. So whenever you bring up race, people have attached critical race theory to it. Even though we've been doing DEI for a while, no one heard of critical race theory until last year.
Yeah, the author is Jerry Craft. I'm sorry about that brain cramp there, but James, we're seeing just whatever, like O'Shea just said, it doesn't matter if it's about race in any way, if it's about Black people, if it's about Black history in any way, it's classified as critical race theory.
I mean, that's the silliest thing I have ever heard. Critical race theory isn't even taught at the elementary and high school level. It's mainly a college thing. But I mean, come on, you're going to sit up here and you're going to ban Beloved by Toni Morrison, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and then Ruby Bridges, This Is Your Time. I mean, you're going to ban books like that? I mean, that is just crazy. What the purpose of reading books, a diversity of books, is to teach students how to think critically and read critical material and being able to parse exactly what is going on in the book and what it says about our larger society. What are they going to do now, Stacey? Ban Sally, Dick, and Jane? But hey, I know a good book that's good, that the one that these folks like. Maybe it's Up from Slavery from Booker T. Washington, or maybe the autobiography, I should say, of Clarence Thomas, or maybe Thomas Sowell's books on his personal journey, how he was picked up by Hoover Institute economists and rubbed his head and said, "I like you."
They call Celeste Headley the light-skinned Black Jew. Celeste, most of the books that are targeted for ban, they don't teach critical race theory, but are written by and about people of color. I just want to hear your feedback on that. You went through the whole process, and you experienced some of this as well, as you well stated. It's a tough process, right, as an author, to get a book together in the first place.
Yeah, and let me say a couple things here. I mean, first of all, it's not elementary school kids that are studying critical race theory. I got all the way through college and graduate studies without studying critical race theory. Almost no one is taking a class in critical race theory. They're great classes, but almost nobody has to take those classes. A. B, yes. And I just want to touch on this idea of who's a Black author, right? Because you can see how light my skin is. But the thing of it is, as soon as I tell people that I'm Black, that's it. As far as people are concerned, I'm Black for the rest of my life. And that's fine. I'm totally okay with that. Like, that's who I grew up with. That's my family. But like, I'm a Black author. and now that I've written a book about race, I will be first and foremost in people's minds. My grandfather was William Grant Still, the Dean of Black Composers. And they always introduce him as a Black composer. And I always say to myself, I mean, do we introduce Gershwin as a Jewish composer? Like, why does the identifier always have to be there? Can he not ever be just a composer? And it's just a great composer, right? Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing with Black authors. Like, as James was saying, some of these books aren't about race. Mm-hmm. They're just, and I wanted to read this bit of a statement from the American Library Association. I'm sorry, I'm getting all heat up about this. The American Library Association said, and I'm going to quote them directly, they said, "In recent months, a few organizations have advanced the proposition that the voices of the marginalized have no place on library shelves, falsely claiming that these works are subversive, immoral, or worse. These groups induce elected and non-elected officials to abandon constitutional principles, ignore the rule of law, and disregard individual rights to promote government censorship of library collections." The voice of the marginalized have no place on library shelves. We're not even talking about books like mine that actually literally deal with race. We're talking about anything that is written by somebody who's Black, regardless of how dark that skin is.
So what's the solution here, Oshia? What's the solution?
The solution, I'm not one for banning books. I'm not one for censoring books. I believe the solution is to actually let librarians do their jobs. Librarians actually go to school. They learn how to pick out books that are age appropriate. If your child is getting a book that you don't think is appropriate, that's a conversation for you and your child. I think a lot of parents here don't want to parent. They want the schools to parent for them. They're saying it's about protecting their children, but that's what your job is as a parent, to come in and say, okay, this is why I don't think this book is appropriate for you. Because who's to say that book is not appropriate for another child? And if you're talking about just anything that has to do with Black people, then that's a whole lot of books here. We're talking about Maya Angelou. James mentioned Toni Morrison. She's been targeted too, at one point. So a lot of great books that just happen to talk about Black people, or just people and are written by a Black person, are now targeted. And to Celeste's point, is basically we don't want anyone thinking about Black people at all, because we're not mainstream, and that's quite disgusting when you really think about it.
Yeah, and we earlier we were talking about in the news topics about voting rights and civil rights, and this is, again, it's like we're in 2022 and yet we're 1962 all over again, right? It's pretty amazing, James, what's going on in this country.
Well, if you want to go back further, you're talking about the 1960s. You want to go back further in Europe, We're talking about 1930s Nazi Germany. They started banning books and they burned books, among other activities, in order to curtail the Jewish voice. And we all know what happened in the 1940s in terms of that. We have to put a stop to this nonsense. And I agree with Ms. Boyd. People really have to step up and be parents and let the librarians do their job and not let these, let this go on. One quick point I want to make. It really upsets me that the right wingers are attacking and talking about banning books when what they need to be doing, they need to be going to these school board meetings and looking at these budgets and looking at these Board of Education members and these high level administrators spending people's money crazy and not focusing on the classroom, but going to these luxurious conferences on the taxpayers' dime, and the taxpayers aren't seeing any results of going to these conferences.
Yeah, well, and again, I go back to, and I love Celeste's response. As we think about authors, and particularly authors of color, there is a whole lot that goes into not only collecting and writing the book, but also getting a publisher, getting an agent. Celeste, and I'm sure you could talk about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the odds are stacked against Black authors, and very often what you want to write is not what they want to hear from you. And my grandfather came up against the very same thing, right? Either they don't want you talking about race in any way, shape, or form, or that's all they want you to talk about. He had critics telling him, why doesn't he write more Negroid music and stay in his lane? In other words, like it's sort of the same complaint when every time an athlete speaks up about civil rights, just play the game, right? There's always people trying to police the way that people of color act, police what we can say, police how we can express ourselves. And that is the same that's true when you're trying to get a book published, right? And so the odds, and we know statistically speaking that it is much more difficult for a person of color, especially a woman of color, to get an agent and then get a book published. And when she does get that book published, she's probably going to get a much lower advance and a lot less invested into marketing that book than other writers, especially white males. So yeah, getting that book on the shelves is a struggle. And then to have people suddenly ban it, I mean, it's just insult piled on injury.
Yeah, I think we have our president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, with us. Dr. Chavis, have you joined? Yes, and there he is, the well-traveled Dr. Ben Chavis. Dr. Chavis,
thank you.
I thought maybe you wanted to weigh in a little bit before we do close out on this topic of banning books, banning Black books.
Well, I don't think any books should be banned, and particularly books that are written by Black authors and other authors of color. I think that, first of all, I want to congratulate Celeste on her success with her book, a very important book, very timely book. I think we need to, we represent the Black press. We need to publish more. I want the NMPA to establish its own publishing house so that we can publish these authors without taking through all the changes that the mainstream publishing industry does. It is a struggle to get the truth out. And I think this whole thing about critical race theory is a diversion. I remember years ago, they came up with the thing called reverse racism. Every time a Black person said something about it, oh, you're just a reverse racist. See, it's almost a denial of people in power, that people who don't have power to take away their voice, take away their right to articulate. That's why during this year, Stacey, this is the 195th year of the Black Press of America. We have to plead our own cause. And we plead our own cause by publishing our own newspapers, by writing our own books, by raising up a generation of thinkers. And I think studies have shown that young people today are less prejudiced than their foreparents. And I think at a time with the browning of America, we need more books, not less books, that are written by persons of color. If we're ever going to have a full democracy, we got to start treating each other fairly and equitably in the publishing world, as well as the economic world, the spiritual world, the culture world. All these things intersect. So I think this is a discussion that's well timed, and I commend all of the authors out there, including you, Stacy. You know, you're an author. How the struggle it is to get published and then get distributed, because we need our own distribution. That's another thing. You can have a great book, but if it's not on the if you walk through the airport and can't see your book, why? It's because the
Why?
distributors also discriminate.
Yeah. Well, Doc, Dr. Chavez, I go to you and say this, Dr. Chavez. I'll leave this in your lap as the president and CEO of the NMPA. How about the NMPA starting its own publishing arm?
Yes. Well, you heard it first right here on Let It Be Known.
There you go. And so I want to go back quickly to Celeste Headlee. Celeste, the author of Speaking of Race. Celeste, where can we find your book? And just give us a short synopsis as we close about the importance of Speaking of Race, your new book.
If we aren't talking to other people about race, that's what makes us think that race is a shameful topic to talk about. When you avoid a topic, it gets associated with shame or some kind of scandal. We need to make it open. We need to make it normalized. 5-minute conversations about race, 10-minute. We need to remove that fear of this topic so that it doesn't become something that's only talked about in whispers when Black people aren't present, right? The more we talk about it, the more normalized it becomes, the more we find solutions.
Celeste Headlee, the author of Speaking of Race. We really appreciate you joining the Black Press this morning. It's a privilege to have you. And of course, James Wright of the Washington Informer and a regular contributor of Let It Be Known. We appreciate James. And Oshia Boyd is always great having Oshia. Oshia knows when to crack the whip. And so we always try to be on our best behavior when Oshia shows up. So we thank you so much. And stay tuned. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
I've been just picking on pieces of you. Think about how can I keep you?
What we talked about, sometimes we underestimate the contribution of African culture to the rest of the world. But other civilizations affirm the contributions of African culture. But because part of our miseducation here in America, we're almost ashamed of our African culture or get defensive.
That's how they taught us. They taught us to not be to not love our noses and our hair and our body frames.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And the dance. I mean, they were doing also breakdancing centuries ago. And if you look at this fusion between some of what even our Latino brothers and sisters, they don't realize they have a lot of African ancestry in their culture history. Right. In the Dominican and Colombia, and, Venezuela, other places.
Right.
So, the only reason I'm bringing this up, I think that the future of the world is changing. Also, technology is helping, but again, the importance of the Black press and the Black media and young people, I just think it's. When I went to that CES show and looked at all those exhibits, I saw a lot of our art forms that have been appropriated.
We're not there.
But we're not
But we
there.
said we talked
I mean,
about
it's
that.
They
amazing.
love black culture. They don't love black people.
Even the designs of the cars. You know, some of the most gifted GM at General Motors. I do a lot of work. General Motors advertisers. So I'm in Detroit a lot, and a lot of their insight now, they're depending on young designers to give that foresight that I talked about in terms of the future. So it's something called Afrofuturism. You know, that we also need to pay attention to.
Right.
Right, okay, so. I'm Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr.
And we are the new school of the Black Press of America.
Yeah, I've been just picking up pieces of you. Think about how can I keep
Just like to say congratulations to the NNPA as you celebrate your 195th anniversary. Since your inception, you have been the voice of the Black community, a trusted partner, consistently delivering credible reporting and perspectives on important news and issues that affect African Americans, whether those be interesting issues or difficult issues, and that's how you've built this foundation of trust. Pfizer is proud to partner and to continue to partner with the NNPA on educational efforts to help advance health equity and address health disparities in our community. So thank you for all that you do, and we look forward to working with you for the next 195 years.
Today I work closely with my cardiologist to manage my hereditary ATTR-CM. If you're African American, have a family history of heart failure, and are experiencing any unresolved symptoms of ATTR-CM, have a heart-to-heart with your doctor or an experienced cardiologist to find out if it may be hereditary ATTR-CM.
everyone, and congratulations for our 15th milestone to the Black Press of America.
That's right. We are so incredibly happy for you, and we're so thankful for all your hard work and just how incredible you are and how you show the world who we are.
Absolutely.
And we just appreciate you so much. God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bakari Sellers, CNN commentator, national and global influencer, one of America's future leaders. Here on the Chambers Congress, we're very pleased to welcome Bakari T. Sellers.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to be in your presence. Thank you to the Chambers Chronicles for having this country boy up here in the big city.
Well, thank you, man. Well, you know, country boys make a big difference in the city.
That's right.
And listen, Bakari, you're a CNN commentator, you're a distinguished lawyer. At 22 years old, you get elected to the State House in South Carolina, one of the youngest elected officials ever in the history of our country. And you're really on top of a lot of these issues. I want to get into them, but I first want people to know your family, the Sellers family. Originally from South Carolina?
Yeah, so my family is rooted deeply in the movement. My father got involved in 1955, like many people in his generation,
yes,
around the death of Emmett
Emmett
Till.
Till.
Yeah, he's a part of that Emmett Till generation, a lot like you have the Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown generation of today. You know, he came up here to Howard and befriended a young man named Stokely Carmichael, and the rest, as they say, is history. You know, he joined SNCC, led one of the searches for Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And then February 8th, 1968, when he went back to South Carolina to help organize. And, you know, no one could have imagined that on that night, 3 young men, Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton, would have been killed.
3 were killed and 27 were wounded.
Including my father. My father was wounded.
Shot in the shoulder.
He was shot in the shoulder. And the unique part about that from just a pure jurisprudence standpoint is that all of the officers who fired shots into the group of students were charged. And it was the first time in our country's history that law enforcement was charged with federal civil rights crimes. Of course, they were all found not guilty. And
the fact they were charged made history.
That was a footnote in our country's history. And then, uniquely enough, my father was charged with 5 felony counts, looking at a maximum of 75 years. They misplaced the evidence, backdated the indictment from February 8th to February 6th, and my father was charged, tried, and convicted of rioting. He became the first and only one-man riot in the history of this country. And
sentenced to a year in prison.
Hard labor, as they called it. And the unique thing, one of the other kind of nuances is that, you know, my father, I will tell you that the greatest sacrifice he had to make was not being in jail per se, but it was being in jail for the birth of my big sister. My sister's name is Nosizwe Abademe. It's Swahili.
Yes.
And Abademe means born while father's away. She was born while my father was in prison. And so just the people oftentimes do not understand the scars of the movement that families still carry today.
Yes.
And I remind people that my mother had to go through a pregnancy and give birth by herself because the state of South Carolina took my father away. My father came out of prison with a felony, black man with a felony in the South. So my mother had to make those ends meet. And the difficult times my family went through are all scars that we still carry today, but we've overcome. And so, you know, that's the movement encapsulated.
Right, but because those scars are also badges of honor.
Oh, no doubt.
And listen, man, your father wrote a book, The River of No Return.
Yes.
While he was incarcerated.
Yeah.
Unjustly. And then he wound up becoming a college president.
Yeah, in between my father's arrest and his imprisonment, you know, he went and got a degree from Harvard. And I joked that, you know, he's probably the only person on the yard with a degree from Harvard at the time. But he and my mom, they both, just like a lot of parents during that generation, taught their children to have this insatiable desire to learn as much as possible.
Exactly.
And my parents said that we could go to any college we wanted to go to, but we had to go to college and we had to go to an HBCU.
Right.
And so...
well, shout out to your mother for sticking with your father through all that.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of, you know how the movement is, man. It puts a lot of stress on the families of the activists.
No question. And you know, my mother is one of the strongest people I know. She had to go through that and deal with that. But she wasn't, her family was middle class. they weren't too necessarily keen of the movement, but they were aware of the movement, like a lot of black families throughout the South. But she was a part of the desegregating class of her high school at Hamilton High School in Memphis, Tennessee. And so we, that history, that family history is there on both sides.
I was going to tell you a little anecdotal story. February the 8th, 1968 was the Orangeburg Massacre. Your father was wounded. So several months later, I have the privilege of driving your father, Cleveland Sellers, and Stokely Carmichael.
Oh, Lord.
From Charlotte to Greensboro. Stokely had to speak at A&T. Mm-hmm. And I had the privilege of welcoming him to UNC at Charlotte. I was a student, college student at Charlotte, activist, so all of us had big afros. Those two, Stokely Carmichael and Cleveland Sellers, were more than buddies. They were comrades in the struggle.
Well, for me, growing up a child of the movement and being able to touch and talk to and call him uncle and then be there for me has been, one of the blessings of my life. And it's the reason I'm able to sit here on your show today. But it was Stokely, it was Uncle Julian and Julian Bond, it was Marion Barry.
Yes.
I firmly believe Marion Barry is the greatest city mayor in the history of the country. And, we don't let people talk bad about Marion in our family for everything that he did for black
people. There are thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of residents of D.C. who would affirm that today.
Well, I mean, he's one of the few individuals who's taken leadership of the city and created a whole middle class full of black folk.
Right.
And the lessons that they taught me from, what Fannie Lou and Ella Baker had taught them just helped, mold my outlook and prepare me to go in the courtroom or prepare me to go into CNN today.
What's your perspective? Because there's so many predictions in mainstream media that even though the browning of America is continuing to go, it's as if that we're being displaced. Gentrification on the one hand, and then at a time we should have record voter turnout, all these voter suppression is going on.
COVID has exposed the systemic inequities we have in our communities. Mm-hmm. And it's a golden opportunity for us to spend time talking about these inequities and how we fix those problems. When you have communities that don't have access to clean water, when you have communities that don't have access to a hospital or quality health care, that you have food deserts, that you're breathing in or inhaling polluted air from brownfields, that you have these preventable illnesses that you see, the cardiovascular diseases, the diabetes, and then you overlay that with the pandemic, you see why black folk have been the population to die at a higher rate and suffer those economic losses as well. This pandemic has ravaged our communities, both from a public health and economic perspective. And I think we need to utilize this moment to talk about those underlying issues. So that's one. Two, we're also having these very interesting, unfortunately, they become infantile conversations around the issue of race. One of the blessings of the Trump administration, whether or not people believe it or not, is that we ain't had no choice but to talk about race, right? Because when you have an administration that uses racism as a political currency, you have to talk about those systemic issues. But the conversation has just been asinine at best, and you can appreciate this, right, Dr. Chavis. But it's pushed to the forefront after you have Breonna, Ahmaud, and George. And so you right now you asked a good question kind of about, where are we in this country? And we're at a precipice. We're kind of at a fork in the road whereby we can continue to educate young people about the history of this country, about how far we've come in this country.
Your book that you wrote in 2020, My Vanished Country, what led to that book?
It's crazy because I didn't think anybody wanted a memoir from somebody 32.
Became a bestseller.
Yeah, 32, 33 years old. Shout out to Tracy Sherrod, who was the editor at Amistad Publishing House, who set me down over a 2-hour breakfast in New York and told me to tell my story. And you know this, but my life has been bookended by tragedy from, the Orangeburg Massacre, which happened before I was born, but it's the most important day of my life, all the way through 2015, when the Charleston Massacre, where my friend Clem and 8 others were killed in Mother Emanuel AME Church. And so you have these bookends of tragedy, which I don't find myself to be, atypical. This is the Negro experience in America. And then the political successes I've had and failures that I've had, and just being a millennial and growing up during this time. And the book came out, and you will appreciate this more than most. It came out May 19th, which, as we know, is Malcolm X's birthday,
Yes.
and 6 days before the death of George Floyd. And it was a book that I think people could be proud of because it told those untold stories, a lot like what you do here on the Chronicles. I wanted to tell the stories about the Black women who sit on the front 2 rows of the church, who wear the big hats, who when you hug them, you smell like Chanel all day, and they use 2 sticks of butter in their pies. And then I wanted to tell the stories about the men who served in Vietnam, and they sit in the barbershop all day long, every day, not getting a haircut, but telling you about why Muhammad Ali would beat Mike Tyson and how, when King came through town. But this is the backbone of this country. They built this country with their hands. And I wanted to be able to tell their stories too. So, it was an awesome opportunity, and it's a book that's been evergreen and been able to stand the test of time.
Well, those narratives are so important. And, you're not only a great lawyer, but you're a good writer.
Well,
having to communicate those stories is so important. I tell people all the time, we're not a cursed people, we're a blessed people. But how to articulate our blessing sometimes becomes a challenge.
But you appreciate this, and this is why you having this platform and me being able to come on this platform is so important, because you touched on it. There are 2 points I want to make. One, we have to own our story, because if we don't, then people will tell you that Dr. King came down to this country, won a Nobel Peace Prize, and told you to judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, and then he died in his sleep. They don't tell you about the revolutionary that was King.
That's right.
The freedom fighter who was fighting for wages in Memphis, Tennessee, the person who had a lower approval rating than Donald Trump at his death. They don't talk about that person. So we have to control our narrative and tell our story. And 2, griots. We are...
all the way from Africa.
That's what we do. We tell our story. And I encourage people who are seasoned and of a certain age to write notes and write in journals, because your story, Dr. Chavis, is one that needs to be taught and needs to be read about. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting in front of you, but it helps us understand the full...
We're working on the Wilmington 10 story.
There you go. It works on the full... It teaches us the full context of our history and gives us motivation to move forward.
Now, you also, you have 3 children.
Yes.
So you've written this beautiful book.
Yeah.
That also now has become a bestseller.
Yeah.
Tell us about your children's book.
Yeah, who are your people? Because from down south, the first question they ask you is, who are your people?
Who are your people?
Because they want to know whether or not what type of stock you come from, whether or not your daddy went to church or your daddy stole, right? So they just want to know who you are. And who are your people is an opportunity where it was pretty cool, because I got a chance to walk my children through the pages of history, and they got a chance to learn about their people. One of the stories we do tell, and one of the stories that hits home from you on the pages of the book, is February 1st, 1960.
Yes.
On the Woolworth's lunch counter.
Greensboro, North Carolina.
Greensboro, North Carolina. Those young men and women who sat down, and I believe the New York Times called it soil that was fertile for dissent. And so we shared that story. We shared the stories of cotton fields, but we also talk about the heroes, from Barack Obama to Mary McLeod Bethune, to Muhammad Ali, to Kamala and Stacey. And I just wanted young kids to be able to read it and see themselves in the book.
A study has come out that shows that young people today are less prejudiced than their parents or their grandparents. I've read something about how your book is really spreading, not only among African-American children, but children of all ethnic and backgrounds can benefit from stories like you put in your book.
Because I think that one of the major problems we have in this country is that we have an empathy deficit. And when white kids are able to read about where the person that they're playing in the sandbox with came from, it makes for a better relationship. And I think if we take time to learn more, and maybe this is some of that unconditional love that King used to preach about all the time, but if we take time to learn more about our neighbor and meet them where they are, then I think we can have more fruitful relationships.
Well, I hope your book doesn't get banned.
Well, they may.
This, critical race theory.
Right now you have people trying to ban Michelle Obama's book. I mean, it's just, for me, we're at a dangerous, perilous time where you and I are talking about how we educate people. And then there are people who don't want you to tell the story of Wilmington 10, who don't want you to tell the story of the Little Rock 9, who don't want you to tell the story about Orangeburg. And we're like, we're not trying to make you feel guilty. We're just trying to talk to you through the lens of where this country has been so we can understand where we're going.
It appears that the American economy is slowly coming back after COVID. And I know you do a lot of work on the economic sphere as well as the legal sphere. What's your prediction about diversity, equity, and inclusion? I know all of corporate America now, they're hiring vice presidents for diversity, vice presidents for equity.
We have to be very cautious.
Is this real about inclusiveness?
We have to be cautious, and I don't like a VP of diversity, equity, and inclusion who's just there in name and title, who reports to the CEO once a month and has the illusion of inclusion.
Right.
And, you know, it's one thing for these companies and corporations to give organizations money. That's fine, though. We'll take the money, but they haven't changed their corporate culture. Their board is still non-diverse. Their executive committees are still non-diverse. And so you have to change within your walls before you can effectuate change in the community. But along the lines of the community, one of the things this Biden administration has tried to do is put money in the streets to repair many of the things that were broken during the era of COVID. The biggest indictment on this administration, though, is I'm not sure they understand the pain that many Black folk and poor folk in this country are feeling. There's a disconnect. My father was just complaining to me the other day about the price of flounder and whiting at the Piggly Wiggly. That's a very real pain. It's gone up, you know, and it's also led to people committing crimes of survival. You know, I was speaking to a young man named Wax, who is a friend of Charlemagne the God and I, and Wax said, now you don't even have to be rich to get robbed. You just have to have more than the other person. And it's that mentality because of that pain that we have in our streets, because of poverty, because of the societal pressures, et cetera. And I'm not sure what happens here in Washington, D.C. people truly understand or have that level of empathy for what's happening in Southeast D.C. and everywhere else.
How do you see these new rounds of voter suppression? Why do you think there's an all-out effort to keep people from voting?
Well, it's depressing and frustrating because I know the price you paid. I know the price that others paid so that we could actually have that franchise. I think about George Elmore a lot from South Carolina, who filed the suit of Elmore versus Rice so that Black folk could vote in primaries throughout the South, and everything he went through. And it's frustrating that even Strom Thurmond voted to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. In 1981, 82, the leader of the Republicans to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act was Bob Dole. And right now we can't get 10 Republicans to get on board with.
Why do you think that's the case? We're going in a reverse of history.
We are.
We're in a progression of history.
We are, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that one of the things that Donald Trump showed the Republican Party is that there is a base of voters right now who you can win over with fear and you can win over with white grievance politics. And the fear is that somehow people of color in this country, Black folk, immigrants, what have you, are replacing them. And Stephen Miller, et cetera, that Browning of America, they utilize that fear as a tool. And they also know that, you know, the fewer people that vote, the better chance they have to win. When you have elections like we had in 2020, excuse me, that's not a recipe for success for the Republican Party. So that's just where we are. And to be honest, I think we're not electing the best people on either side. People ask me all the time about...
Not only federally, but at state, because a lot of this stuff, the state legislatures...
I mean, when you look at some of these state legislatures, North Carolina, South Carolina, I mean, you just look at the leadership there and how they are operating in a 1940, 50 mindset.
Same thing in Florida, Texas, Georgia.
You named all southern states too. I mean, and so we have to really, really analyze the fact that the majority of the change we want to see is not made here at these beautiful buildings that are here on your screen, but instead are made in our state capitals and city halls.
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, you already have been a former state legislature. You're on national TV almost every day. You're a best-selling author. What's the future of Bakari T. Sellers?
That's a good question, man. I really want to be a great father, and that's because of the example that was set in my household. So that's first. Second, I love politics. It's just that Washington, D.C. and the stagnant nature of it is just so unappetizing. I mean, showing up to work every day with Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Madison Cawthorn, I mean, that just don't sound fun to me. We'll evaluate that when Jim Clyburn decides to retire. But right now, that seat is in good hands. And so right now, we're just going to continue to do the things we do and utilize the platform we have some cool things coming up at CNN, writing some more books, trying to get you all's story, the heroes of the movement, trying to get those stories told in Hollywood, and we'll see what happens.
How do you see technology, the innovations in technology, contributing to more effective social justice movements?
Oh, well, I mean, right now, you remember that Black Lives Matter started with a hashtag, right, on social media.
Right.
Right now, the images that we see that come out of the streets help us when we talk about criminal justice reform.
Sure.
So social media is, and they are where voters are. I mean, there's an entire generation of voter that, isn't going to watch us. They don't watch CNN, right? But they are going to be on Snapchat, and they are going to be on TikTok. And if you want to contact them or reach them, you have to reach them on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. They are the future of this country. And so I do want to see regulation of some of these big tech companies, because when you have pervasive, destructive influences that spread misinformation, like we've seen with Facebook, that is dangerous to our democracy. And I think regulation needs to be there. But it's the new frontier. It's where change is, and it's where you and we have to learn how to operate so that we can talk to a whole new generation of listeners and voters.
How do you see the youth of today? Not just Black youth, I'm talking about all youth in America.
I mean, exciting. Generation Z is the most exciting generation. I mean, they're more exciting than we were. I mean, they're so dope because, they are brilliant, and they're utilizing technology in a way that we never would have imagined. They're utilizing a technology in a way to learn, to connect, to build movements. And this new generation, the Parkland kids, et cetera, they've come out and changed gun laws in this country on a state, local, and national level. They're being a part of the process. You see them running for office. You see them organizing. They're holding their elected officials accountable. So I think we're in good hands. The only thing we have to do, I think, is better educate them about the struggles of your generation and the generations before, because there's somewhat of a disconnect.
Right.
And teach them about those movement tactics and things that they can learn from. But other than that, we're in good hands.
I detect a sense of optimism in your viewpoints. From your soul and from your heart and from your family tradition, what do you think is the most important lesson that all Americans could learn from our history?
There's nothing irredeemable about the United States of America. We just have to reimagine what she looks like. We were once a people in a country of dreamers who dreamed of things that were not yet seen. And for us, and for many of us, that dream was equality, that dream was justice, that dream was love. And I believe those words are verbs. I don't believe there's some esoteric, untangible ideal. But I believe
Dr. King certainly believed that love was a verb.
And justice is a verb too. And I still hold true to those beliefs. And I will not be jaded by reality. And in my house, my kids will know that love is real and justice is real. And they will dream with their eyes open. And I think one day we'll get to finally where this country cashes that bounce check that they've been giving us for so long.
Bakari T. Sellers, thank you for joining the Chavis Chronicles.
Thank you for everything you have done, you are doing, and everything you will do.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Monday, February 21st, 2022. Judge Regina Chu literally shed tears as she ignored prosecutors' request for at least a 7-year sentence for former police officer Kim Potter, who was convicted of manslaughter after she shot and killed Daunte Wright, claiming that she thought she pulled her taser and not her gun. Potter received just 2 years and could get out even sooner. but that's really become a sidebar as African Americans continue to witness a legal system from police to prosecutors and judges that is as unbalanced and unfair today in 2022 as it was during and before the Jim Crow era. This one seemingly takes the proverbial case because the judge actually displayed more sympathy for the convicted cop than for the dead victim. We discussed this morning with Insight News publisher Al McFarlane. But first, the news headlines, and we will bring on publisher Al McFarlane for our headlines. Good morning, Al.
Good morning. How are you?
Good to see you as always, coming to us from those twin cities out there in Minnesota. Thanks a whole lot for joining us. Our first news item this morning, Al, a private funeral service is expected to take place this week for Askia Muhammad, a renowned journalist, photographer, poet, and Black press columnist who died on Friday at the age of 76. For more than 40 years, Muhammad had been a fixture on WPFW radio in Washington, D.C., and of course at The Final Call. In his column, appeared regularly in Black-owned newspapers like the Washington Informant and on BlackPressUSA.com. He was an author whose most recent book, The Autobiography of Charles 67X, featured a collection of photos, poetry, and personal essays covering his life as a politically and socially engaged journalist. The White House reached out to the Black press about Muhammad, with President Biden seeking out the journalist's family to send personal condolences. A public memorial is planned for next month, family members have said. Al, I don't know how well you knew Askia, but he certainly was very well known. We are seeing more and more tweets and comments come in as the time has gone by.
Didn't know him personally, met him, had a huge respect for him. What I knew him about was his bridge work, carrying Black people to Africa and connecting Black journalists with Africa over the years. And so he was, in my view, a Pan-Africanist, one that wanted to make sure that we had direct access to the movement and governments in the motherland in Africa, and certainly an asset to our community and to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Askia Muhammad has died at the age of 76. Certainly will be missed big time in the Black press, and I'm sure with his family for sure. Also in the news this morning, Al, a Black Florida teenager who says she was bullied for months by classmates was falsely accused of threatening her school and then wrongly detained at a juvenile detention facility for 11 days, according to her family and attorney. Now the 13-year-old's mother, Leslie Ann Davis, is suing Renaissance Charter School at Pines over the November incident. She says, I feel distanced. This is what the teen said. I feel distanced. Nia Wims, the teenager, said at a news conference. She says, I really don't want to talk to anybody. The lawsuit alleges that the girl was being bullied at the school in Pembroke Pines, about 20 miles north of Miami. Davis reported the alleged bullying in August and had requested a meeting with school officials, according to the lawsuit. The meeting never happened, and finally a complaint went out, and the school never addressed the family's concern. The bullying continued until Davis made the decision to pull Wims from the school and enroll her somewhere else. In November, Wims began talking with a Renaissance Charter School student on Instagram about the bullying. The suit identifies the second teen as just with the letters MS. After the conversation, MS allegedly created a fake Instagram page using Wims's name. While pretending to be Wims, MS allegedly sent herself messages that included threats to blow up the school and kill people, including MS and a teacher, according to the lawsuit filed. The messages were disclosed to the teacher, who informed school officials and the police. The charter school was placed on limited lockdown, but later determined to be safe. But the complaint went forth, and Pembroke Pines police began investigating what led to the lockdown and were allegedly told by MS that Wims had sent messages threatening the school, and officers then interrogated Wims, who said she had talked with MS over Instagram but did not make any threats. On November 19th, Wims was arrested and taken to a juvenile detention center. Police said in a statement at the time that she was being charged with a second-degree felony for making a written threat to do bodily harm or commit an act of terrorism. She spent 11 days in the facility and had to undergo psychological evaluations, and she was released later on November 29th after our investigators determined that the messages came from an IP address connected to MS. This is horrible.
So what's happened to MS? Do we know yet?
So right now, there has been no official charges yet, although investigators said that they are continuing their investigation.
And what's the demographic on MS? She's a white student, I'm presuming.
A white student, yes.
Yeah. And so, it highlights again what the culture would try to say is a one-off event, that these are individual failings of people with personal problems. But Stacey, I think what we have to say and see from our point of view is the consistency of this kind of activity that presumes that it's easy to discredit and destroy and characterize anyone Black. And we're used to this. I think it was what's his name? Paul Mooney had the joke, $1-800, you know what?
Yes.
But the premise was that when anybody white is in trouble, find a plausible threat from Black people to deflect. And it happens. It was a joke, but it's not a joke. It happens all the time. This is an example of even getting down to our children. But it means that when Black boys, for example, are in private or public schools, integrated schools, systems distrust and diminish, try to destroy their sense of well-being and try to create this conformity in a Black boy that tells the Black child where and what power is, and that is not within him or his family. So there's a problem that we have to address, and it's systemic, it's pervasive, and this is one more example of it.
Yeah, and one of the comments, Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times, we couldn't agree more. She says, Al, that this is hard to imagine, to see our young children in handcuffs. It's horrible. And as we say that, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. Good morning, Al McFarland. And
good morning, Dr. Grant.
This is a great way to start off this Monday morning with reality, with facts, with truth. But the pendulum of history is moving toward the interests of communities of color. It's our job in the Black press to point out these contradictions, to point out these injustices, but also it's our job to advocate that we take not just note of what's happening, but what do we do about it? 2022, we got to vote some people out of office. We got to vote some people in office, and we have to overcome all this voter suppression. That's sort of, Al, I think one way we can celebrate the 195th anniversary of the Black Press of America, which is what we are celebrating this year, is that the Black press should help lead the way for a reawakening across Black America and with Brown America, that we unite, we strategize, we organize, we mobilize, and we need to win some victories against racism, some victories against voter suppression. All these issues are interconnected, and what happened in the case that you're describing is symptomatic of a serious problem that America still has.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I tell you what, again, I was throwing that to you, Al, on the comments. Paris Brown, it's hard to imagine see our young ones and young children in handcuffs. Bobby Henry says physical handcuffs are bad enough. However, when we put handcuffs on the mind, we got a whole other problem. And Rosalind Osgood chimes in that MS should have been arrested immediately after it was determined that MS sent the threat. Why was MS treated differently? And she puts in all capitals, race.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, back to the whole landscape. Look at the data and find out what the percentage of Black children being expelled from schools is around the country. That's the tail of the tape right there. Black children, black boys in particular, get expelled at exponentially higher rates. So the entire apparatus, we call it the kindergarten to prison pipeline, works on identifying and dampening the spirit and the self-worth of black children in general, black boys in particular, so that it's almost, and we can choose to call it conspiratorial because the impact has a conspiratorial consequence where our children and our lives become fodder for the grist mill, this process of grinding up and destroying human beings for the profit of other communities. They make a business out of our misery. We get the misery, they get the money. We must say, as Dr. Ben just said, no more. Not in 2022. We have to shine a light on all of these inconsistencies, the structural arrangements, the agreements that by their nature deprive us of our rights, our constitutional rights, and also attempt to derail our sense and their sense of our humanity. We can't depend on them, but we must rely on ourselves. And we have to operate with the conviction that our being true to ourselves, Dr. Ben, eliminates or creates a process and a pathway for freeing them from their bias. Their bias is a problem for them and for us, but it's hurting us, it's killing us, right? And encouraging us to kill each other. I think that the organizing, you're talking about the Black press leading the way, redefining, creating a new narrative is the pathway to shift the dynamic for our own salvation. Doing that is the salvation of our society, of humanity, from my point of view.
Well, 195 years, as Dr. Chavis said, the Black press has been bringing these things unvarnished to you, and without edits. We don't edit it down to make it sound one way or the other. We just give the truth, don't we? Also, to go along with what you're saying, our main topic this morning, Kim Potter, she sentenced by Judge Regina Chu, who literally shed tears, ignored the prosecutor's request for at least a 7-year sentence for the former police officer out there in Minnesota, and gave her 2 years out, and Dr. Chavis, and totally ignored the dead victim's family's request, totally ignored the fact that she killed this young man, snuffed his life out, very young age. Al, you were there, you're out there, you followed the Potter trial, you followed the situation with Daunte Wright from the beginning. The immediate reaction from folks in Minneapolis.
Well, this was kind of the response we expected, and we were surprised when it didn't happen this way with the George Floyd case. Nobody really believed that Derek Chauvin would be sentenced as aggressively as he was. And if you recall, our community in the country, I think the world, all of us were kind of marveling at a process that finally worked right. But that was then, this is now. And there's a pendulum here. The pendulum, George Floyd, before that, Christine Diamond, a white woman, was killed by a black Somali police officer who said that she surprised him and his partner when they were investigating a potential, abuse situation in a dark alley in a South Minneapolis neighborhood, right? And the woman comes out of her house in the dark to the back of the car, taps on the car, and the Somali officer says, seeking to preserve and protect his partner who was driving, he pulled his service revolver and shot the person, as it ended up being a woman who was unarmed and an immigrant. She was from Australia. So in that case, the officer was sentenced, I think, first and second degree manslaughter charges, and at first 15 years, now maybe 7-8 years in prison. So that sentencing took place. So then you have George Floyd, right? And here the whole world saw how that happened. What would the sentence be? Would the George Floyd justice match the Christine Diamond justice? The court said, and the attorneys for Christine Diamond said there has to be a transformative resolution. And by transformative, they refer to money. And Christine Diamond's estate got awarded $30 million. So then here comes George Floyd getting killed by the city of Minneapolis, the police department. And the Black community, and particularly the lawyers involved, expected that there had to be transformative resolution in this case as well. So you had a fairly major criminal settlement and civil settlements in that, plus you have a federal trial still going on with some of the defendants in the George Floyd murder. So now fast forward to today, this sentence for the killing of Daunte Wright. It's almost as if the social structure is saying enough is enough. We've given you sort of your comeback. So, you know, we put the Black cop in jail and we gave the white family a lot of money. You expected the same from us, and we've given you that in the George Floyd case, not because we're being fair, but because you burned up the country, right? We're reacting to this pressure. And now the society seems to be saying enough is enough. You've had your day, and we're going to go back to business as usual. And so a 2-year sentence, but you know, I was watching Dr. Chavis and Stacy a YouTube show the other day, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but there's a case of the Nashville police officer. His name was Delkey, who was indicted on a first-degree murder charge for shooting a Black man, Daniel Hambrick, in Nashville in 2019. Same situation. This guy gets a plea deal, though indicted and charged with first-degree murder. He ends up getting a plea deal for manslaughter and a recommended sentence of 3 years. Mm. The tragedy is that the family, the victim family, was not even notified of the deal. Yeah. And in court, the Black attorney for the family charged that here's a case of a prosecutor, the defendant's attorney as a former prosecutor, and the prosecutor being country club golf course buddies and cooking up a golf course deal, not even involving the family, the victimized family, and certainly not involving justice. Coming up with a story saying, oh, the guy is sorry, and that a 3-year sentence is enough in exchange for his murder of a Black man. So
yeah, we keep
this
seeing
case
that.
reminds me of that. Here we go again. Yeah. And I'm wondering if this is going to be the pattern from this point on. That's my question.
Yeah, we keep seeing that. But we also saw something along the lines of what you're saying in the Arbery plea negotiations, where the family, Ahmaud Arbery's family, said no way, no how. They went public. They had a news conference. They put pressure on prosecutors and the judge to say, don't take this deal with these guys. And sure enough, the judge responded by throwing out that plea deal. So Dr. Chavis, I know that it takes us to take action as well, not just to wait for prosecutors or others to take the action.
Well, one of our publishers in the last 195 years of the Black press said it best. His name is Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass said in the North Star, freedom is a constant struggle. What we won because of the pressure in the George Floyd case told us that we cannot relent. Mm-hmm. There's no reverse gear. And we should not see these cases in isolation. And I'm glad Al McFarland pointed about the Nashville case, which is connected to the Minneapolis case, which is connected to the California case, which is connected to the North Carolina case. All these cases are connected. What connects them? Systemic racism, centuries of economic exploitation, centuries of miseducation, centuries of racial hatred and racial prejudice. And you do not overcome all of that. I'm glad Brother McFarland mentioned the term transformative justice, transformative equity, transformative equality. We have not yet transformed the system. We're chipping away at it. I make a comparison to dismantling apartheid in South Africa to dismantling apartheid in America. Keep in mind, apartheid in South Africa was patterned after apartheid in America.
Mm-hmm.
People think, oh, what? How did these racists in South Africa come up with apartheid? Because they got it from the United States of America. They got it from the transatlantic slave trade, which started in 1519, not 1619. And so I think that the lesson, Al and Stacey, is that we have to be vigilant. We take what victories we can win. And when we have defeats, when we have setbacks, we have to come back stronger. I like that analogy of the pendulum. The pendulum swings in both directions, but who determines which way the pendulum swings?
Mm-hmm.
When Dr. King said that the arc, or the moral arc of justice, the moral arc bends towards justice.
Yeah.
Okay, who bends it? Who bends the arc? What is the pressure that bends that arc? That's where we come in. That's where the Black press come in. That's where the Black church comes in. That's where Black-owned businesses come in. That's where the Black community, but not alone. I keep saying we have to stand with other communities of color in solidarity and action and continue to fight for freedom, justice, and equality every day, not just during Black History Month, but every day. We have to point out these wrongs, try to right them the best way we can, but never lose our fighting spirit, never lose our and what we learned in the aftermath of George Floyd was that people will become in solidarity with us if they see us move. But if we're standing still, if we're in shock and awe every time something, I remember what happened when all those people were killed in the AME church in Charleston, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
People were just utterly shocked
mm-hmm.
that something like that would happen in a church while people are praying, but that's the systemic, endemic nature of white supremacy that we all have to work together to overcome and to transform.
Well, Al, so let me go back to Kim Potter. 2 years, does that mean she's going to serve 2 years? Or doesn't that mean that she can possibly get out even sooner?
They say the likelihood is 16 months, and so it won't be 2 years, it'll be a year and a half. And, what I'm hearing on the street is what kind of deals will she be offered? Will she get? I don't know whether the settlement requires that she never, ever benefit or profit from any selling of a story or speaking engagements or anything associated with the outcome of this trial.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, I was definitely going to ask you about that because, she'll do the 16 months and then she'll come out and she'll be a TV star.
And get rich. That's right. Well, it's like, what's the kid's name in Wisconsin that
yes, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Rittenhouse, right? Just that is incredible for all of us to think about him, and he killed white people, right? But him walking past law enforcement and the presumption that it was okay for him to carry arms and walk past law enforcement with the arms till they finally realized he's the one that did the shooting and the killing. And it's like the story last week of the kids in a fight in the mall in New Jersey,
yes,
right?
We brought that here and let it be known. Yep.
Law enforcement comes in and presumes automatically guilt and subdues a black person, a child, and then tells the white kid to go sit down. This ain't about you. And from what I saw, the white kid was offering his hands to be cuffed. And they said, sit down. We're not doing you like we're doing this guy here. And it looked like the black guy was getting worse in the fight and was being pummeled by the whites when the cops interrupted. But the details aren't the point, the process. and the pattern is the point. And so I think we have to continue to point out every instance of injustice. Every time we see it, we got to call it out, speak about it, and challenge white people, challenge ourselves. Because what happens is that we become so indoctrinated to believe that this is the way the world is, and that if we're in the news, we obviously are at fault. The society holds us at fault all the time. The default position of our society is that Black people did it, Black people caused it, Black people make it not work, or living off of white people, none of which is true. And what is true is that this entire apparatus, you could call a criminal enterprise, and the criminality of it is in its relationship with Black people, the original sin being the theft of life and labor of African people. And so to the degree that this country is not willing to admit and adjust, we got a problem. That problem is going to exist. They're not going to change it. We must. Some of them can be educated. Many of them can be educated. All of them can be redeemed. There's no human being that is beyond redemption. But the work has to come and will come from us. That's what I believe.
Yeah, and real quick, Dr. Chavis, as we wind down, Al McFarland of Insight News, he mentioned the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Was that sort of a pendulum swing the other way when we saw, when he was arrested, we saw even celebrities start giving money to his defense and speaking out on his behalf. And of course, we saw how that judge, a despicable way in which he ran that courtroom. Was that a pendulum swing in that way, Dr. Chavis?
Absolutely, it was a reaction. Keep in mind, Donald Trump got elected as a reaction to Barack Obama for 8 years. Let's not forget that.
Yep.
And now what's going to get ready to happen? You have Biden and Harris at the White House. A reaction is coming in 2024. In fact, we're going to see reaction in 2022. And the question is, what are we going to do? Are we going to be observers of the pendulum swing, or we're going to make it swing in a certain direction? I think it's our responsibility not just to forecast the future, but to help shape it, to help construct it, to help transform it by our actions. And I think if we would take these steps toward mobilizing and organizing, we will get others to join us. But, as Dr. King used to tell us, the ball is in our court. What are we going to do? And I think that we can still make progress this year. We have to fight for the gangs. Look how they chipped away voting rights, and look all the voter suppression laws that are going on. Look at all the gerrymandering that's going on. This has called to action to us. I like what Al said. We should not ever assume that white supremacy is normal. We should never assume that these systematic racism cases in the courts. What the judge showed in the Kim Potter case, she was more empathetic to the perpetrator of the violence with hardly no empathy for Daunte Wright. And why? Because he was a Black child, a Black man, and so our responsibility, we have to make sure that family is healed, resourced. I don't think it's over with. I think there's civil rights violations involved in that. I think the U.S. Justice Department needs to get involved, as they are involved in the Arbery trial now in Georgia. So we have to be consistently not just aware, but consistently involved. And we create the change that we desire by our own actions.
Well, thank you so much. Of course, Dr. Chavis, Al McFarland. You guys can catch Al McFarland every day on the Black Press USA's Facebook and YouTube page with Conversations with Al McFarland. He is the publisher of Insight News, one of our fantastic member newspapers. And stay tuned each and every day this year as the Black Press of America celebrates 195 years. We wish to plead our own cause. For too long, others have spoken for us. Those were the words of the founders of the Black Press. Thanks for joining Let It Be Known. We will see you tomorrow.
On behalf of the PGA Tour, it's our pleasure to congratulate the NNPA and Black Press of America on its 195th year of service to its audience. The NNPA is not only a trusted voice for the Black community, but all communities. Congratulations.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. And let it be known, this morning, we have a very special guest, a special advisor to President Biden and the Director of Public Engagement at the White House, Cedric Richmond, is expected to join us shortly. But first, of course, let us bring on the President and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the NNPA, Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair, and all 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies across the country, we're glad to be here on another historic day for the Black press.
Absolutely.
We're not only going to have the Honorable Cedric Richmond with us on Let It Be Known this morning, but you and I in a couple of hours will be inside of the White House for an exclusive with our publishers, the Black Press of America, talking with the White House about the progress of the Biden-Harris administration. So we're looking forward to it today.
Yeah, and here I am, Dr. Chavis. Black Lives Matter Plaza is right behind me. Yes. The White House is right across the street, and we are ready to roll. But first, of course, let's start with the news headlines. In Philadelphia, an all too familiar plea is circulating. The city's police department said it needs the public's help in finding 13-year-old Jada Blackwell, who was last seen on Sunday, October 10th, along East Haines Street in the city of brotherly love. Jada stands about 5 feet 2 inches and she weighs about 130 pounds. While authorities said they couldn't describe her clothing, Jada has brown eyes and black hair. And anyone with information about Jada, please call 215-686-3353 or dial 911. And unfortunately, Jada Blackwell isn't an isolated case. On June 11th, 17-year-old Janiyah Kane went missing from her home in Chicago. Authorities said she has black hair and brown eyes, and she stands 5 feet 6 inches tall. Janiyah reportedly weighs 140 pounds and frequently changes her hairstyle. Anyone with information should call 1-800-843-5678 or 911. And also this morning, it's been 9 months since loved ones last saw Craig Lowes of Waterford, Michigan. The 33-year-old's disappearance has stunned his distraught family, who said he's always in contact with his loved ones. He was actually the glue to his family, his aunt, Sharon Dillon, said the other day. Authorities reported that they recovered boots near the apartment complex where Lowes lived that could belong to him. If anybody knows anything, we want them to call the Waterford Police Department immediately. If anyone has information, call 248-618-6041 or 911. The National Newspaper Publishers Association routinely keeps track of missing individuals of color and has endorsed the mission of the Black and Missing Foundation, whose aim is to help families of those missing, shine a spotlight on them, and provide needed resources as they search for their loved ones. Dr. Chavis, this is an ongoing situation. We've been reporting now for years about the plight of missing African Americans.
Absolutely. And of course, we need to chide and challenge the mainstream media. They don't pay attention when Black girls are missing, when Black boys are missing, when Black people are missing. But that's the role of the Black press. So thank you for continuing not only the great series that you've done, particularly on missing Black girls, but on missing Black people in general. We're going to continue to let people know. We're going to continue to help the families try to find their loved ones or to find out what happened to their loved ones. This is the role of the Black press.
Yeah, another role of the Black press. And Dr. Chavis, we're going to show you a video that's extremely disturbing. An officer with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department has been criminally charged and should face termination after body camera video.
Not going to do this, right?
Handcuffed man in the head. I think they're ready for that.
Not going to do this, right?
Stop. You're done. You're done.
You.
No, nobody cares what you're saying.
Nobody cares what you do either.
Not really.
You understand that?
Yeah, I'm not.
You
I'm not the
understand?
one. I'm not the one out here complaining.
No, that was a thing. Nobody cares what you do anymore.
I know nobody's out here
Nobody
complaining.
cares what you do anymore. You understand that?
Lean back.
Nobody cares what you do anymore.
Lean back.
How the fuck am I gonna lean back with the fucking you hold my belt?
Look, we're not gonna do this, right? We're not gonna do this, right? Stop. You're done. You're done. You're done. Are we done now?
Yeah.
Roll over. You're done.
I can't.
Roll over.
I can't.
You're done. There you go. You're done. There you go. There you go. Done. Police brutality. Just link him up. There you go. Police brutality.
Yeah, I guess as you see that, it's extremely disturbing. There's really no words anymore. That is certainly why we have folks like Attorney Ben Crump, who is considered America's Black Attorney General. I think we've seen enough of that video. It's just so disturbing, Dr. Davis.
Absolutely. It's, racially motivated police brutality is terrible. Not only in Indianapolis, in Dayton, it's all over the United States. And we're hoping that the Congress will reconsider the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. I think the Senate really failed all of America, not just Black America, by not passing this bill. The House did what it was supposed to do, but we're still calling for criminal justice reform, police reform.
Yeah, and the officer there is Sergeant Eric Huxley. The Marion County District Attorney Office has charged him with official misconduct and battery with moderate bodily injury in connection to the September 24th arrest of Jermaine Vaughn. It's just so disturbing. Also in the news this morning, as we move along, the House of Representatives, speaking of, have approved an extension of the nation's debt limit through early December after the Senate passed a stopgap measure last week in a bid to avert catastrophic default and economic disaster. Now that the Democratic-controlled House has passed its short-term extension, it is clear for President Joe Biden's signature. Dr. Chavis, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had warned all the lawmakers that the federal government would likely run out of cash earlier this month, or later this month, I should say, by October 18th to be exact, unless Congress raised the debt ceiling, setting up a ticking clock in high stakes. And I tell you, they came almost right up against the deadline to get this thing done.
Well, again, the Biden-Harris administration and the Democrats in the House and the Senate, they're doing what they're supposed to do to protect and ensure a future for the American people. It is the Republicans. They are not only recalcitrant, they're blockers. They're blockers to progress. And I hope that when people in some states get ready to go, like in Virginia, get ready to go to the polls, that people have to remember who are the blockers to progress, who's attacking democracy, who's trying to suppress the vote, who's trying to deny adequate health care for everybody so we can get out of the pandemic. And I think it's clear. I think people have a great responsibility and motive to go to the polls in record numbers. Because at the end of the day, Stacey, we're going to have to replace some of these people in the Senate. We're going to have to replace some of these people in the House. It's time to clean out the blockers.
Yeah. And Dr. Chavis, when President Biden, or then candidate Joe Biden, was running for president last year, I remember it being February, and it looked from the outside that it was pretty bleak that the president, Biden, the former vice president at the time, would have an opportunity to even claim his party's nomination. Then something special happened. He sat down with the National Newspaper Publishers Association, you in particular, and our publishers was there down in South Carolina as well. And the next day, he got the endorsement, a special endorsement, a very key endorsement from Representative Clyburn. His candidacy took off from then. And the president from then, Dr. Chavis, even before then, but certainly since then, had pledged
that he was going to do everything in his power to level the playing field for African Americans and others of color, and that included HBCUs. Has the president done the job that he said he was going to do? Some say absolutely, but there are some with short-term memory, forgetting the last 4 years. Well, I tell you who doesn't have short-term memory. Our special guest this morning, the special advisor to the president and the director of the Office of Public Outreach, Cedric Richmond. Good morning, Director Richmond.
Good morning, and thank you all for having me.
Good morning, Congressman Richmond, and thank you so much for your leadership. First, as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus for years, representing New Orleans, and then the outstanding job you were with Joe Biden when he was campaigning. A lot of people said, well, why is Cedric spending this time with Vice President Biden at the time? And we now know that you had a foresight, you envisioned what is going on now. We salute you and what you continue to do in the White House. And later on today, we are looking forward to having a one-on-one with you inside the White House. So thank you for joining us this morning, the Black Press of America, on Let It Be Known.
Thank you. And probably should have been here a lot earlier than today. But what we've been trying to do is keep our head down, keep working. We've lost over 700,000 Americans to COVID. We're digging ourselves out of a recession, and we've just been trying to do the work. And even with our HBCUs, which is what we started with, we haven't gone out and told people that through the American Rescue Plan, we gave HBCUs $4.2 billion, 1.6 in capital finance debt forgiveness that really didn't have much to do with COVID. It was because we understood the impact it would have on these universities. And so we're going to keep investing in our HBCUs because we know how important they are, but we also know how important the Black press is also. So, it's venues like this where we get to ask and answer those hard questions. And, the most important one is, what have you done for me lately? And we're going to keep working. And I just heard you all talk about police reform.
Yes.
Police reform broke down in the Congress, but when it did, we knew we needed to act no matter what, but we didn't want to be the reason why Republicans walked away from the table with Senator Booker and Representative Bass. But when we saw that they couldn't get anywhere, the president acted. He directed Department of Justice, DOJ banned chokeholds and reformed the use of no-knock warrants and carotid holds in all federal law enforcement agencies. And so, and now we're embarking on executive orders, and we're going to bring in everybody to the table to hear their voice and to see what people want. So we're just going to, we have to keep working. This is too critical of a time for Black people in America for us to get it wrong. And if there's anything that I think the HBC community knows, is that the president has had a very ambitious plan when it came to the amount of funding that he wanted to give them. We're still, no matter what, will double or triple their all-time funding. But we wanted to make long-term investments into the facilities at our HBCUs. And that's still our goal. And we're going to work with Congress to try to get them where we want to be. But it's a process.
And we should point out, too, that the director is an HBCU grad himself. Our vice president, Kamala Harris, is an HBCU grad, a proud HBCU grad. Both of them are very proud HBCU grads. And the administration has other members that are HBCU grads. Director Richmond, is it, as I said at the top, short-term memory seems to be the theme here, because we tend to overlook what happened the last 4 years. Is that the case? Do you think that folks, especially the media, have overlooked what the country went through the last 4 years and now have put all this on you guys' shoulders?
Well, look, HBCUs did get some advancement in the last 4 years, but that was because the Congressional Black Caucus went to work to get it done. And we were able to get it done even in a hostile environment. But I think that far too many times that people, you don't get credit for things. And the president was honest and said, I want to do more for HBCUs than anybody else, basically combined. I mean, HBCUs get about $1 billion a year in funding. So the truth is you can't cut $30 billion out of $1 billion. We had a goal to provide more funding for HBCUs, which we're going to do. And at the end of the day, it's going to be significantly more than they've ever received before. But we still want it to be transformational. When I got to Morehouse, my science lab at Morehouse was not as nice as my science lab at my high school. And those are the things that we want to do. We want to make sure, and we're doing this now, make sure that those tier one research institutions, if they want to apply for all these millions and billions of dollars in research, well, you need to partner with and bring along a minority serving institution or HBCU so we can build capacity in those schools so that they can move up to tier one institutions and get that research, especially when we start looking at health disparities and all of those things. But here's where the rubber meets the road. And I don't want to only give you the rosy side of it, but I want to give you all the facts. This piece of legislation started at around $6 trillion. We introduced it at 3.5 trillion. And then Congress wrote up what they thought could fit in that 3.5 trillion. Now it looks like we're going to end up somewhere way below the $3.5 trillion. So you can't do $6 trillion worth of things in, let's just say, 2.3, let's say 2 trillion. You just can't do it. So things are going to get haircuts, and there are a bunch of deserving things in there, especially when you start talking about equity and for the Black community, that we have to continue. The child tax credit that lifted 34% of Black families out of poverty, 50% of Black children out of poverty. We want to put real money into Black maternal health. Black women are dying twice, at a rate twice their white counterparts. When we look at, childbirth, so the list goes on in terms of all of the needs in the community. And the truth is, we're trying to reach it.
And
we want to meet it.
I'm sorry, you mentioned that $3 trillion price tag, but can you just, for once, we keep hearing the 3 trillion, and what folks don't seem to understand that it's over a period, I believe 10 years?
It's over a 10-year period.
Yeah, so it breaks down. It's not a $3 trillion one lump sum thing here. It's less money than what's spent in the military. It's less money than what's spent in a lot of other areas. But this plan, the key is that it helps so many entities if you had the entire $3.5 trillion, particularly HBCUs, correct?
Absolutely. And that's why we wanted the $3.5 trillion. And we didn't get there by saying we want to spend $3.5 trillion. We got there by adding up all the needs, all the investments that we wanted to make into the country and into communities of color. And a lot of those investments would be first-time investments that were historic. For example, community gun violence. Community gun violence, we were going to invest $5 billion in it because we know the toll that violent crime is having on communities. And it's in a very creative way to get violence interrupted, to invest in recreation, invest in after-school programs, and fight crime the way that you should, and that is by investment. And so, look, all of these things compete, but we were here to talk about HBCUs. We are focused on our HBCUs. So even if you took the $40 billion, which the proposal was, and for HBCUs to compete for half of that, so that's $20 billion spread over 10 years, you're talking about in the neighborhood of $2 billion a year. And if you ask me if we're going to increase funding the HBCUs in the neighborhood of $2 billion a year, I think we're going to come close. And so it may not be in the exact same program. And Congress, we're working with them to write it and to figure out the competition formula, because we do believe that like-kind schools should compete against like-kind schools. And so that means that, those schools that have traditionally been tier one and have the grant writers and the lobbyists, they should compete against each other. And then, schools that, I'd hate to say like-kind because Morehouse is much better than Howard, but
you have to be careful. You got to be careful.
I know the vice president isn't here, so I can get away with it. So if you look at Morehouse and Howard and Florida A&M and Tuskegee and Jackson State and Southern and Alcorn and all the list of our great HBCUs, Morgan State, Hampton, if you go down the list of those, they should be competing against each other for a separate pool of money. And we still think we're going to get that done.
Well, Congressman Richard, as a proud graduate of Howard University, HU, I want you to know I was on the phone earlier this morning with the president of Tennessee State University, Dr. Glenda Glover. In fact, today she has an op-ed in the Black press about some of the misinformation that was put out there in mainstream media, trying to play down what the Biden-Harris administration has done for HBCUs already, record funding already this year. Can you talk about the importance of our HBCUs, the Black press, the Black church, but particularly HBCUs? We work in NAFIO, Dr. Leslie Baskerville, the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education. I just want you to know that Black college presidents, they're on the phone, they're writing, and certainly we're going to support in the African-American press to get the news out. There's so much misinformation. Can you just, what's your view on how would a group like AP or Newsweek or USA Today spread misinformation about the Biden-Harris administration to HBCUs?
Well, that's what we're seeing. And so if we just go back to 2016 in the election that elected President Trump, you will see that misinformation targeted at African Americans was the motive and the method used by the Russian trolls and misinformation campaign. And so whether it was telling people, oh, you can vote by the internet, or, you know, you don't have to go today, whatever they did, they targeted it. And I'm not telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know. They targeted at minority communities in an effort to suppress the vote. So as much as we're fighting for voting rights and doubling the size of the voting rights section, suing in court, putting money on the street, all of those things we're doing, misinformation is a real problem. And so part of the question is, why now? Well, you have a hotly contested governor's race in Virginia that is home to several HBCUs. And one way to tamp down our young people's enthusiasm to vote is to show that either the system or people are not recognizing them, not investing in them. So why bother going and vote? And so when you tell them that the Biden administration cut $30 billion from HBCUs, then it's a gut punch to them. Now, it's a flat lie. Everybody has debunked it, but we have to make sure, and that's why the Black press is so important, because sometimes people need the unfiltered truth. Well, all the time they need it, and you all provide that. And so I'm just happy to have a chance to kind of clear the record on that and some of the other things that we're doing in the administration. And I think that, you know, you made the offer and I'll accept and double down, but I will come back as often as possible to give updates on what the administration is doing. And so it's important. And look, I saw, and I'll be real quick, but I saw someone post that I should talk about HBCU graduation rates. HBCU graduation rates are in great shape. And I'll tell you why. Because what people too often do is compare HBCU graduation rates. Let's take two specific examples. And they'll compare Southern University to LSU.
Right.
But what they don't compare it to is the Black graduation rate at LSU compared to the graduation rate at Southern. And then here's the other part of it. You have, and I give this to credit to Dr. Kimbrough, he came up with this analogy. You don't look at, you should look at Black colleges and the HBCUs and measure them in a different light. Because in Olympic diving, if you dive off the diving board and you do a perfect, just plain old dive, no splash, you're going to get about a 6. You know why? Because there was no degree of difficulty. So if you look at HBCUs that take students, many times take students that come in, may or may not be taking remedial, may or may not had AP courses, but most of them came from public schools in cities where they were underfunded. They take those students and they shape them into leaders in the community. And so when you look at that graduation rate and you look at what they're producing, it is stark contrast to their counterparts. And I, I believe it. I know it. I've lived it. And we appreciate that work that is done by our HBCUs. Now, do we need to help them improve their graduation rate? Absolutely. But graduation rate is not the number that I go by, because too often at HBCUs, kids are matriculating through, they're making good grades, but they can't afford to go back that next year. That's not the school's fault. That's not the student's fault. That's our fault. That's government's fault. So that's why I don't talk graduation rates too much, because it is not the key indicator for me of the success of a school. I think there are a number of other ways we can look at and measure the success, but we will do it, and we'll keep pushing our HBCUs.
Yeah, and along those lines, Director Richmond, you talk about graduation rates, but look who HBCU graduates. Those schools graduate, right? They graduate doctors, lawyers. They graduate people into the STEM field. The talent is amazing that comes out of HBCUs. Isn't that the primary reason in itself that we should be looking to fund HBCUs? And James Wright says state legislators and private donors need to fund HBCUs better. Isn't that really what we're striving for, is that type of excellence?
Absolutely. And I'll just go one further. And HBCU graduates need to do a better job of funding HBCUs, and so that we can build those big endowments. So actually what we're doing as a government, we're trying to make up for the fact that HBCUs don't have the same endowment as other schools. So we want to help them with those capital investments into the schools. But, you look at corporations and you look at people who give big $100 million gifts to Harvard and Stanford and schools like that already have billion-dollar endowments. The question is that money best utilized going to them, or would it make sense to send it to a university that's producing outstanding students but is underfunded? And we have to do that. And if you look at what is happening too much in the South, is that they're cutting the money for public education, all public education, year after year after year, and at the same time telling people in the South that we're doing something good for you by making government smaller. And it's just a flat lie. You do well for people by investing in them, giving them access to education at an affordable and accessible rate, making sure that they can graduate and chart their own destiny. And so we're trying to right all of those wrongs, including the wrong by state legislatures that are not matching or drawing down all the federal money because they don't put up the money for the HBCU land grants, but they put up the matching money for the white counterparts. And so we're looking at all of that.
Yeah, well, Director Richmond, the Black press certainly appreciates you, the Biden administration, for allowing us to have this access. We will certainly, our publishers are looking forward to the 11:30 now time that they'll have with you. And Dr. Chavis, a quick closing thought with the director for this morning.
Well, again, I just want to salute the Honorable Cedric Richmond and all the staff. A lot of times, Brother Richmond, can you just talk about diversity, equity, inclusion? I mean, we're going to do it a little bit more in the 11:30 hour, but we're so proud that what you are doing, what Vice President Kamala Harris is doing, you're representing the best of the HBCU community. And I just want to let you know that our college presidents, I'm in touch with them. All of them are activating. You mentioned Virginia, at Virginia Union, at Norfolk State, at all of our schools, at Virginia State and Petersburg. All of the HBCUs are making sure they're getting out to vote in the state of Virginia, as well as the other states where voting is so important. And we just want to thank you. A lot of times, representatives of our community, we don't get a chance to say thank you to President Biden. Thank you to Vice President Harris, and thank you, Congressman Richmond, for all of the work that you do for us inside of the White House. It's very important that you're there every day with the President of the United States, with the Vice President, and the whole team. And I want you to know that we're not going to sleep in the Black press. We're going to stay woke, but also stay activated and stay mobilized. God bless you, and thank you for this time.
Thank you, and I'll see you later.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And remember this, let it be known, be selective, be objective, and always be an asset to the collective. We will see you tomorrow.
Yeah, I've been just picking on pieces of you. Think about how can I?
Good morning, and live from the nation's capital is the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Friday, February 11th, 2022. Despite recent increased attention towards health equity, Black women continue to be underrepresented in breast cancer clinical trials with only 3% participation. The disparities in clinical trial participation are an important factor in addressing why Black women are more likely to die from breast cancer than other racial and ethnic groups. We speak this morning with Ricky Fairley, founder of Touch Black Breast Cancer Alliance, and Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. But first, let us look at the headlines to start your morning. A Black Park Hill High School student has been suspended for 100 plus days for confronting a white teacher who repeatedly used the N-word. The student can be seen in the video demanding that the teacher stop using the N-word, and he says, "Don't put it in your sentences," to which the white teacher responds, "Well, you put it in yours." The Black student says, "Yeah, because I'm Black," to which the white teacher responds, "That's illogical." The teacher is still employed by the district, although he has been placed on administrative leave. We will continue to follow this story as it unfolds, but more than 100 days that this Black youth was suspended simply for telling his teacher not to use the N-word. Also in the news this morning, Betty Davis, the cult funk singer and ex-wife of jazz legend Miles Davis, who left an underappreciated yet trailblazing body of work, died Wednesday at the age of 77. Danielle Maggio, a close friend of Davis, whose research as an ethnomusicologist focused on Davis's work, confirmed the singer's death. Amy Downs, communications director for Allegheny County, where Davis lived, added that the cause of death was natural causes. It is with great sadness, the family says, that we share the news of the passing of Betty Davis, a multi-talented music influencer and pioneer rock star, singer, songwriter, and fashion icon. Davis, of course, her longtime friend Connie Porter said in a statement that most of all, Betty was a friend, aunt, niece, and beloved member of her community of Homestead, Pennsylvania, and of the worldwide community of friends and fans. At a time to be announced, we will pay tribute to her beautiful, bold, and brass persona. Today, we cherish her memory as the sweet, thoughtful, and reflective person she was. There is no other. We send our condolences to the family of Betty Davis. Also in the news this morning, earlier this month, we brought you the news of multi-bomb threats at more than a dozen HBCUs. But unfortunately, it seems the attack on Black institutions now has trickled down to grade schools. Sam Collins of the Washington Informer reported in Thursday's editions of the paper that students, teachers, and staff across the district were evacuated from school grounds Wednesday after bomb threats were issued to at least 8 public and public charter schools. DC Public Schools spokesperson Enrique Gutierrez said the threats were made at Paul Laurence Dunbar, Roosevelt, and Ron Brown high schools on Wednesday afternoon. All students and staff were safely evacuated in accordance with DCPS protocols, Gutierrez said. DC Public Schools values the safety of all our students, staff, and visitors, and will continue to offer support to our school communities while the Metropolitan Police Department investigations are ongoing. Other schools that received bomb threats included McKinley Technology High School, Friendship Public Charter School, Seed Public Charter School, KIPP DC College Prep, and IDEA Public Charter School. In a statement Thursday, the police department announced that a 16-year-old had been arrested for the bomb threats. The agency said it continued to investigate the threats with federal partners. So again, these Black schools are under attack. Also in the news this morning, in true Snoop Dogg form, holding a blunt in one hand and dancing to the thumping and soulful music blaring in the background, the iconic hip-hop superstar announced that he was, quote, back on death row. Snoop, whose real name is Calvin Brodus, revealed that he had purchased the equally iconic label Death Row Records. Later, Blackstone Incorporated, private equity firm, confirmed the deal. Snoop Dogg released his first album with Death Row Records in 1993. Less than 30 years later, he now owns the entire company. In a statement, Snoop says, "I am thrilled and appreciative of the opportunity to acquire the iconic and culturally significant Death Row Records brand, which has immense untapped future value." Snoop said he feels good to have ownership of the label that he was a part of at the beginning of his career and as one of the founding members. He says this is an extremely meaningful moment for him. Today, Snoop Dogg will celebrate by releasing BDOR, Back on Death Row, or BODR, right? His brand new album on Death Row Records. So Snoop Dogg fans, you can look for his music, his new music today. Well, Black women in breast cancer, clinical trials seem to be something that doesn't happen often enough. Despite recent increased attention towards health equity, Black women continue to be underrepresented in breast cancer clinical trials with only 3% participation. The disparities in clinical trial participation are an important factor in addressing why Black women are more likely to die from breast cancer than other racial and ethnic groups. This morning, we welcome Ricky Fairley, founder of Touch Black Breast Cancer Alliance, and Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. Good morning, Ricky Fairley and Paris Brown.
Good morning.
Good morning. So happy to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Let's get right into it. First of all, we know that Black women, this is like in all other trials, right? Black people in general don't ordinarily participate in clinical trials, but we see some real problems with breast cancer, don't we, Ricky?
Yeah, and it's really across the board. So for breast cancer, the issue is Black women have a 41% higher mortality rate than white women. Black women like me, I'm a 10-year survivor of triple negative breast cancer. We have a 71% higher relative risk of death than white women. Black women also have a 39% higher recurrence rate of breast cancer than white women. And the worst factor, I think, is that Black women under 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate and die at 3 times the rate of white women. And these numbers are staggering. And when you start digging into the why of this, everybody sort of wants to blame it on the social determinants of health. And clearly they are a factor: access to care and getting good care and where and how Black women get care. But it's really physiological. And the drugs that we currently have on the market were never really tested on Black bodies. So when I was sick, I did the regular therapy, I did chemo, radiation, surgery, everything. And my cancer came back very quickly because the drugs didn't work for me. And they often don't work for most people. So I tried some experimental drugs and I'm here 10 years later. But my doctor gave me 2 years to live. And that's really very typical for Black women. I'm a miracle. And so I'm very blessed to be here. So I know God left me here to do this work. But what we know is that, we don't have the science about our bodies to know how the drugs work in our bodies and how really any of the therapies work. And it's because we're not participating in research and we haven't historically. So we're trying to change that.
Yeah. And before we go to Paris Brown, let's welcome the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. And this is another day that the Lord have made. We're so pleased to have our special guest this morning on this Friday morning on a very important subject for Black America.
Oh, absolutely. And Paris, I know that you've had some experiences and you have questions for Ricky. So let me throw it over to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Not only my personal experience, and you talk about women under 35, and I, at the age of 26, or probably even younger, suffered from what's called cystic breast, right? And so the doctor told me, well, that's, Black women have that. And so you have cystic and dense breast. But what happened to me that really forced me to deal with it was there was discomfort when I slept. And so I did have to, at a very young age, I took mammograms and I had to get what's called fine needle aspirations in order for me to be comfortable. And I say that to say, at a very young age, I took control of my health. And yeah, they didn't necessarily want me to, they just kind of said, okay, that's something that's normal in Black women. I said, while it may be normal, it is very uncomfortable for me. So every month I would have to examine myself and you'd look straight at myself. And it was interesting because on the surface, you still couldn't see it. And so I would always get pamphlets, and I really took, and one of the things we have to do is be our own self-health advocate.
We do.
Not only for myself, I had the unfortunate and fortunate opportunity to have 3 friends that had 3 different experiences. And part of what we need to talk about are our beliefs. We have fears, right? We don't want to know what's going on. But I had a friend, and I'm a believer, Doc, who believed God for her healing, right? And didn't do anything. And she died. I had one that went the neuropathic way, and they told her she didn't have cancer. She was drinking these concoctions. She died. I had a 3rd friend that also went naturopathic, but she took the science and she was determined to live. And she says, I'm going to fight this. She found the best doctors. And one of the things that was interesting, and then I like, Ricky, we could talk about, I'd love to know more about that. And what she did was she's partnered with her doctor, and the doctor, she did natural, she did the scientific, she went through the treatments, and she's a survivor of probably, I think, 15, 20 years. And what the doctor had to explain is this natural treatment will cancel out this drug. So it was really important, the collaboration with her doctor to ensure that she was cancer free. So I'd like to hear more about that and just talk about these beliefs, because some of it is not taking control of our health at a very young age, not getting second opinions, right? Not trusting our bodies. We live with our bodies. So we have to listen to what our bodies are saying to us and not be afraid to go and say, look, this is not okay. And this is not normal.
Yeah. So Ricky, let's go back a step. We talked about the clinical trials. Why is participation so low with Black women?
We're afraid. And I think we're afraid. We have the history of Henrietta Lacks and syphilis studies. And, there's a lot of earned medical mistrust in our community, right? And so that's part of it. I think also we did some research last year, and we learned that Black women, will say, oh my God, don't do that. You'll get the sugar pill and die. And there is no sugar pill in cancer research. So we learned that there's a very, very low level of understanding of what a clinical trial is and how it works, how the science actually works. That in cancer research, you're either going to get what we call standard of care, which is a drug that's currently on the market and is working in some people, right? Or they may add another drug that could be new and different and add a new, save your life. And so you're never going to be getting a sugar pill. You're never going to be getting nothing, which is a misconception about clinical trials. So we have to have faith in the science, and it's working. It's working, when it works. We actually had a study come out this week, which is amazing because I've been screaming that Black breast cancer is different. But a researcher just identified, I'm going to read you this, that there's a tangible molecular difference in how the cells repair damaged DNA between Black women and white women. And that's a critical factor in the development of cancer. So now research is starting to validate that, yes, Black breast cancer is different and needs different treatment. So we really have to, take that to heart. And every piece of science we get is going to advance our ability to stay alive and not die. And I think, what we're talking about here is, a lot of times Black women go to the doctor, especially when they're young, and they get dismissed, and they don't know how to advocate for themselves, and they don't know her story, they don't know their family history, and they don't know their bodies. And I think you were able to say, guess what? This wasn't here last week, or this feels different. I feel something different, and fight for yourself and get the attention that you need, because many young Black women are not getting that attention, and they're dying.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight something before I go to Dr. Chavis. Bobby Henry of the West Side Gazette, our publisher down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He says, Ricky, I love that sign in the background. Heaven is a little closer in a home by the water.
By the water.
Yeah,
I love it.
He's asking, is that where you find your peace?
It is where I found my peace. You know, when I got breast cancer, I learned that my peace is non-negotiable. And I quit my life and started a new one. And I sold my big house in the suburbs in Alpharetta, Georgia. And I moved to where I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay in Annapolis. And so I go paddleboarding on most mornings. I went yesterday, even though it was like 40 degrees here. But yes, my peace is the water. I'm looking at it right now.
Dr. Chavis, the underlying thing here, as with so much, right, is systemic racism, right? Because Ricky points out the mistrust that Black women, Black America has, and rightfully so, right, Dr. Chavis?
Justifiably, and it's part of the history. But what we have to do, and I'm so pleased to have our guests on, to show that even with these disparities, even with the discrimination, we have to be determined to live. We have to choose life over death.
Yes.
And let me just say something about the science. I think there's a false dichotomy about, particularly from, I'm a pastor, and I have to remind even pastors and people with faith, faith is important, but faith does not take the place of science. And when you say that we need to believe in the science, I agree, but the science also comes from God. God is the ultimate scientist.
That's right.
And a lot of times people in the church say, well, you know, I'm not going to depend on my doctor. I don't need no doctor. All I need to do is depend on God. Well, where do you think the doctors come from? Where do you think the science come from?
That's right.
Where do you think our molecular structure comes from?
Right.
That may be different. And so I think there's a false choice sometimes, particularly in the African American community. They think, well, you know, that's a white man's medicine. I'm going to get some black man's medicine. No, you better go get some medicine that is going to save your life. And even with all of the denials of people wearing masks, that people don't want to get treatment for COVID, they thought that melanin will prevent us from getting COVID. All these myths and stereotypes. And that's why these testimonies, and I want to thank our two sisters for coming with the Black press. And as you know, Stacey, that's why we have the Black press. Because nobody's going to give our people the information to save our lives but us. We have
Keep
to
it real.
plead our own cause, but we have to make sure that our people listen to our own cause.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know, faith without works is dead.
There you go. There you go.
Right?
Got to do something about it.
That's right, Reverend Ricky. I'm going to have to get you ordained.
Well, Ricky, let me ask you, let's talk about the emotional barriers, Ricky, because I know there's emotional barriers as well.
Yeah. It's just scary. And you know, we wear the purple cape, right? The Black woman, we are powerful, we are, strong, and we take care of everybody and always put ourselves last. But I'm gonna give you my last piece of chicken. I'm gonna buy you a car and walk, and I'm gonna do all these things. And but all of a sudden I'm sick and I've got cancer, and my doctor told me I'm gonna die. And so that power is stripped away, right? So now we're powerless. And you want to give me a drug that hasn't been on the market yet? Are you kidding? Right? I'm stripped away. And also, we often get taken out of our comfort zone to go to a clinical trial. We go to our Cook County Hospital in Chicago, where everybody's waiting in the waiting room for 3 hours, eating fried chicken because they're going to be there all day. And you drive me in a car to the white neighborhood where it's this beautiful office and there's nobody that looks like me, and you want to stick a needle in my arm? No way. So that loss of control that Black women feel in that situation is very scary, and they won't do it. So we have to figure out how to make them feel powerful in those situations. And my analogy is, I would love to have every clinical trial in that beautiful Victorian house in the Black neighborhood, where you have to go through the wrought iron gate, right? You walk up on the porch, the Black grandmother comes out, gives you a hug, takes your 3 kids into the playroom, feeds them spaghetti, takes you into the treatment room, puts you in a cushy chair with the quilt that she made, turns on Luther Vandross and gives you the shot. So, and so somewhere in that spectrum of science, we have to make her feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But first, she's got to believe, and she's got to know that she's in a safe environment and that this is good and safe for her. And also, there's a lot of laws in place now. You can't do that stuff anymore. You can't. Henrietta Lacks wouldn't make it now. That stuff with that science can't happen. It's illegal, and that doctor would be under the grave. So you have to believe that science has advanced and you're protected and safe. And if you don't want to do it for yourself because you're too crazy with a purple cape, do it for your daughter. Do it for your daughter. Do it for your granddaughter. And you know, that Advil you took last week was in a clinical trial. That Tylenol you gave your baby was in a clinical trial. So take those drugs. Do it for your kids. Do it so that you can be there for them, but also so they won't get breast cancer.
Yeah,
so that's what we're trying to message and say, when we trial, we can defy the odds. When we trial, we can take care of ourselves and we can keep our families safe and we can help our community. So when we trial is so important.
And you know, that emotional health is very important because of the three scenarios that I shared. The third one, she says, I'm determined to fight this. And I had a privilege of reading one of the stories you had shared in your link, and how these women said, look, I'm going to figure out what restaurant I'm going to go to after I get this over with. And you saw that determination and the will to live, right? And using all of the resources, right? And using the science to get through it. And so that is very important, to be emotionally strong, to get that support, and to be able to move through this. So what you're doing is so important. And your breasties, I love that. Encouraging women, because you have to see it, right? That's the thing. Hope
you
for.
have to see it.
That's
you
the thing. Hope for, right? And so move towards that. Yeah.
Like my doctor told me, you have 2 years to live. I said, you don't understand.
Right.
I can't die right now. I have a daughter at Dartmouth. I got to pay tuition. So me, you, and God, and somebody's got to work this out. I have to fight for myself and find a doctor that knew triple negative breast cancer. And I went on some experimental drugs, and I'm still here 10 years later. But when you get those, you know, I could have gone home and said, okay, I'm going to die. No way. I didn't have time to die right then, you know, and I knew I had work to do. So to this day, I work for my 3 granddaughters.
I like that. I didn't have time to die.
That happened.
But Vicki, tell us a little bit more about the campaign, the When We Trial campaign, because I know it's a call to action for Black women to know the facts about the impact breast cancer has on our community and come together to have a voice in research through clinical trial participation. How do we get more information about the When We Trial campaign, and give us a little bit more information?
Sure. Well, you can go to whenwetrial.org. And so as a survivor, you know, I talk to breasties every day, and I often get the call, what, Ricky, the doctor said XYZ, but what do you think? And so I have this voice of trust, which is scary because I'm not a doctor, I'm a marketing person, right? So, but I can say, you know what? I got 5 breasties that had that experience, because they want to hear the stories, they want to hear the testimonies. And so when you go on the internet and you go to Dr. Google and you put in clinical trials, it's very scientific, kind of over my pay grade talk. It's very scientific, and they're talking at you. Well, Black women are going to die, and Black women this. I wanted to create a space where it's about we and us. So I changed all the pronouns, and I tried to break the science down in our website to make it so I'm talking about me. I'm talking about you, my friend. I'm talking to you, my sister. So I want to make a place where Black women can feel comfortable and get the information they need and the level of science they need and understanding, so they do feel safe. And they know that I'm in it with them. That we're all in it together. And, you know, Black women do amazing things. We have done amazing things. We've changed voting rights. We got presidents elected. This is an amazing thing I want Black women to do. I want you to read this. I want you to go to the website, whenwetrial.org, and get a better understanding about what this science is all about, so we can save our lives.
Wow. And so whenwetrial.org, so when they go to that website, give us an example of what they may find that you know, dispelling the myth.
Yeah, so basically we do talk about the myths. We talk about the mistrust. We try to break it down and say, okay, here's what's different now. Here, you know, there is no sugar pill. You know, that you can, you know, it is a very common thing to, you know, the science is there for you. We also give them access to clinical trial opportunities. So there's this horrible website called clinicaltrials.gov. So any drug that's in a trial is in that website. It's made by the FDA. but it's like going into hell with your eyes closed and your hands tied behind your back. It's crazy. So we gave them portals to clinical trials that are very suited to breast cancer, and we were very selective in how we pick the portals, so it's easy to do. We also have a great partner named Citizen, and they basically digitize your medical records and match trials to your biology. So we have these resources that will make the whole process easier for Black women, and also try to explain things in language that people understand. It doesn't need to be the scientific jargon that only doctors understand. It needs to be for real people, that real moms who have 3 kids and have to go to work today, you know, and real grandmas that have to, want to take care of the grandkids. We try to break it down so it's for us. It's all about us. It's all about Black women, and that's what we try to do on our site.
You know, we often talk about when we talk about education, the importance of Black teachers. But with breast cancer or any other medical situation, the importance of Black doctors comes to the fore too, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. But there aren't a lot of Black doctors. And I think even Black women doctors are like 2%. So clearly, Black women have better outcomes with breast cancer. Guess what? When they have a Black doctor, and even better when they have a Black female doctor. So but we don't have enough of them. We actually also in my foundation we have an HBCU internship program, and we are hiring interns right now, paid interns, and we hire pre-med, pre-nursing, pre-health students, and we have them do like basically a social media campaign about breast cancer. And we had 15 interns last year. And of the 15 interns, we asked them to do an interview with their mom and their best friend. And none of them had ever talked to either one of those people about breast cancer in their lives. And then by the end of the internship, they felt like, oh my gosh, I made a difference. My friends do self-exams now. My mama told me her story. And my aunt Edith had breast cancer. And so we know that our youth we're trying to support our youth so they will choose a medical career and get more doctors for our community. But it's a lot to do. It's a lot of stuff, and it's coming from all angles. But we're just trying to tackle it so that Black women feel empowered and strong and educated about what they need to do to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, we got a question. I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to you're the expert, Ricky. It's coming from James Wright, the Washington Informer reporter who believes that Hollywood is trying to get him to wear a dress. But he says it's an inside joke, but he says, can men have breast cancer?
Yes. So male breast cancer is about 1% of breast cancer. So it's not a lot. All right. But guess what? Black men get breast cancer at 50% higher rate than white men and die at a 66% higher rate than white men because they're not checking their breasts. And guess what also? Black men can pass the genetic gene to their daughters. And they may not get breast cancer, but they may pass it. We're also now seeing some research. Again, we need to advance this science that prostate cancer in a dad could end up as breast cancer in a daughter. Colon cancer in a dad. My dad had colon cancer. Is being linked to triple negative breast cancer in the daughter, which is what I had. So all of that science is what we need to learn about, when we don't have enough of it. So that's what I'm all about. And we've got to advance the science. And so watch out, men. Check your breasts.
Check your breasts, man. Is there Bobby Henry is asking, I know we're running out of time here, but this is some great information you're providing this morning. We really appreciate it. Is there anything that can be done to encourage on the same level as midwives? We didn't have Black doctors, but we had midwives.
Well, there's not really midwives in breast cancer, but that's why you got to take care of yourself. You got to know your body. You got to stand in front of the mirror and check those breasts that you love. I know you have a pair. And know your body so that when you do have something unusual, you can go to the doctor and say, you know what, this wasn't here last month. This thing that I feel right now wasn't here before. This is something new, and you have to pay attention to me. And guess what? If that doctor doesn't, email me, and I will find you another doctor. And you can email me at Ricki, RICKI, at touchbbca.org, and I will answer your questions. And I have a great medical advisory board, and I will text them at 4 a.m. and say, I need help. For this patient. So
well, Dr. Chavis, this is what the Black press is all about, right? This type of information.
Absolutely. And again, we're going to have more programs like this. Ricky, this is not the last time we're going to see you.
I'll be back anytime.
We need a campaign, and I want to say something to all the Black men that are watching. We need to support our sisters. We need to encourage our sisters. We need to encourage our whole family. Health, science, our togetherness. We have to be our brothers and our sisters' keepers every day. And I just think that this issue of breast cancer among Black women is something that is not talked about enough in our families. It is not encouraged, and we need to encourage this discussion because the truth will also set us free.
Well, we want to thank Ricky Fairley, the founder of Touch Black Breast Cancer Alliance, the When We Trial campaign, Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times. We want to thank Alex Hill, too, of Alex Hill PR for helping us to put this together this morning. And, of course, our producer, Greer Marshall. We thank you all for joining. Let it be known. Have a safe weekend, and we will see you on Monday.
Thank you for joining us today for our National Issues Forum and for your continued support of the Black Press of America.
We've covered a lot of national issues. Thank you so much for listening and viewing on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Again, we thank all of our corporate partners and sponsors for making today's program possible. We thank General Motors, Pfizer, Reynolds, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Our corporate sponsors are American Petroleum Institute, API, Wells Fargo, AARP, Comcast, AmeriHealth Caritas, In Our Own Voice, the National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, the Facebook Journalism Project, and Google. We thank all of you.
Yeah, I've been just picking on pieces of you. Think about how